Okay, if I could have all the town meeting members, please take your seats. Our tellers for this evening are Mrs. Rodenheiser from Precinct 1, Mr. Moses from Precinct 9. If the tellers could please come forward, be sworn to your duties.
Swear to faithfully and impartially perform your duties as tellers for tonight's town meeting to the best of your abilities.
Town meeting members, if you could please raise your right hand and the tellers will take the count.
$18.
18 and 22, that's 40 plus the moderator. We have a quorum. If you would, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you would remain standing just for one moment. The last time we met back in November, you may recall, we had a moment of silence for one of our members who was battling cancer, Janet Lucci, who shortly after that meeting lost that courageous battle. So I would ask that we stand now just for a moment of silence for both her and also a former school committee member and town meeting member from Precinct 6, Elaine Espindel, who passed away also recently in December. Thank you. All right, at this time, just a reminder, if you could put any cell phones or electronic devices on silent mode, and members are reminded that the use of electronic devices during the meeting is restricted to viewing documents or websites pertinent to the articles before us, and any kind of texting, gaming, or other use is prohibited. The town clerk will now call the roll.
Adubato. Brown. Yeah. Ciccolini. Yeah. Present. Cottam. Yeah. Present. Decaro. Yeah. Present. Dockery. Yeah. Present. Finn. Present. Grook. Yeah. Present. Jones. Yeah. Present. Lopresti. Yeah. Present. McCarthy. Yeah. Present. Moses. Yeah. Present. Politano. Present. Present. Rando. Yeah. Present. Rossetti. Present. Present. Stewart. Present. Present. Vecchio. Bartolo. Present. Present. Cardinali. Connors. Cottam. Present. Devlin. Yeah. Present. Doherty.
Present.
Fowler. Yeah. Present. Garino. Yeah. Present. Lucy. Yeah. Present. Maltese. McLaughlin. Yeah. Present. Palzinski. Yeah. Present. Paracchio. Yeah. Present. Ring. Smith. Yeah. Present. Sweezy. Yeah. Present. Witten. Yeah. Present. Billingsley. Yeah. Present. Carlson. Costin. Present. Present. Cox. Present. DiNardo. Falaska. Yeah. Present. Goodwin. Yeah. Present. Johnson. Long. Yeah. Present. Manugian. Yeah. Present. Mareshi. Yeah. Present. Paolini. Yeah. Present. Quinlan. Yeah. Present. Rodenheiser. Yeah. Present. Spencer. Yeah. Present. Travers. Yeah. Present. So absent tonight I have Adubato, Cardinali, Carlson, Connors, DiNardo, Johnson, Maltese, Ring, and Vecchio.
Madam Clerk, I did hear from Mr. Carlson and Ms. Johnson express their regrets that they couldn't be here. Also, Mr. Donato, who's out of town this week. And Mr. Adebato from Precinct 6 actually took a spill a short time back, and he's home recovering from a broken knee. So I know I speak for everyone. I'm sure he's watching. I know I speak for everyone here when I say that we wish him a full and speedy recovery. Since our last meeting, we posted a notice on the town website and in the local paper looking for candidates to fill a vacancy that we had in the Finance Committee that was left by Maureen Deaver's rise to selectman. 3 individuals submitted letters of interest, and Stephen DiVirgilio, Pevwell Drive, was selected to serve the remainder of that term. I'd like to welcome him to the FinCom and thank him for volunteering to serve town meeting in that capacity. The first order of business is supposed to be accepting the minutes of the previous session. In the past, we have traditionally dispensed with the reading of the minutes since they're generally lengthy, and a copy of them is posted on the town website shortly after each meeting for everyone to review. I do have a copy up here at the podium if anyone wishes to review them. Otherwise, knowing that you've all been diligent about reviewing them online, if there is no objection, the minutes of the last session will be accepted by unanimous consent. Okay, hearing none, the minutes are accepted as posted. So at this point, we'll go on to reports of committees, starting with our Finance Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members. You see before you, does everyone have a copy of the Finance Committee report?
We have extras up here if anyone needs one.
Thank you. The Finance Committee had the pleasure the other evening of recommending Article 2, and I'm sure you can imagine why. This is the first time that we've had this amount of money to put into the stabilization fund. And as you know, over the years, I've supported any effort to put money into the stabilization fund for more than one reason, but principally because it's going to affect our bond rating going forward. And this is one of the tests that they look at to see how much you have in your stabilization fund. So in the long run, this is going to benefit the town in many, many ways, plus adding to the rainy day fund. I would heartily recommend that. As is the case with the other articles, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 7 we did not take a vote on, and 8 is to authorize funding from free cash, and it's sponsored by the Cemetery Commission. At our meeting the other night, it had generally been accepted that there wasn't any information available to make a decision whether to fund the $120,000 or even whether free cash should be used, seeing as though it wasn't sponsored by the town manager. But by the end of the evening, the manager and the cemetery commissioner agreed to meet and discuss this and bring it forward at a later time. So our recommendation was to refer it to the manager, not back to the manager, to the manager, because it was never brought before him for insertion. Aside from that, I believe everything is pretty straightforward. And the fact that we have the free cash to do these sort of things is quite remarkable. They are all necessary. If you notice, most of them will say to supplement the Article 2 for FY14 budgets. That way it enables us to track it and put the budget together as one complete package, so we'll know line by line what the final budget numbers are. So have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pileski. Are there any other committees that wish to report at this time? Okay. I don't believe we have any old business, so that would bring us on to the articles that are before us. As a courtesy to the town manager, Ms. McLaughlin, moves Article 2 for consideration. Article 2 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the amount of $1 million to be transferred to the stabilization fund. And I know the town manager would like to address this and a few of the other ones at the same time.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, and ladies and gentlemen. The articles that I've recommended that have been vetted through the Finance Committee, part of this is we're trying to get a better handle on the budget. And I guess the way to look at these articles is we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive, being able to come to town meeting prior to these things coming up with a transfer, and it allows for discussion and for people to see what's happening. But I guess just to talk about the overall, we are, Article 2, we are looking, recommending and looking to put money into stabilization. I also here to speak, to do a brief discussion with the town meeting, and I think to help educate and explain some of the advantages of sound financial management practices that the town meeting, you guys have supported moving through this transition over the last couple of years is Peter Frazier, and he will address, if you allow him to talk to you a little bit about the bond rating and sound financial management practices. But just to talk about, I guess, the bigger picture so that people get an overall picture. One of the things that we're moving towards, obviously with the adoption of the financial management policies that were adopted by the board and also the Finance Committee moving forward, is that if you can look at it in the big picture, is that a budget that's our size, what we really should be having is between $4 and $8 million in stabilization. As you know, a year and a half ago, we had a $525,000 in the rainy day fund. So putting $1 million in that as a one-time deposit and paying ourselves first makes a lot of sense from a whole lot of reasons, but particularly because that allows us to have flexibility and able to stabilize the town if we have downturns. Part of that also is our budgeting practices, and that's something that we're realizing a little bit now, having free cash generated. One of the things that's recommended and is practiced in most communities is budgeting so that you have surplus, and that's something by design, so that we're able to generate annually 3 to 5% in free cash surplus, and that's what makes sense. That allows us to be able to have a source of funding to be able to put into stabilization like we are doing now, and it also allows us, and part of the plan is having about approximately $800,000 or $900,000 left over after this evening, if things are supported, is the flexibility of being able to, which we did last year for the first time, is to pay for snow and ice in the year that we incur it. So and it also allows us, if the state budget gets cut, to have flexibility to be able to deal with those downturns, as well as anything that's unanticipated. So that is the the plan moving forward financially. And if we get to a point that we have $4 to $8 million in stabilization as recommended, and being able to generate, say 3 to 5% or $3 million in free cash reserve surplus, that allows us to have that also the flexibility of, say, having $1 million and, being able to anticipate snow and ice and different things that may not be anticipated, and pay for them within the year we incur them rather than carrying them over. But it also allows us, when we get to that point, of building a foundation so that we can have a strong house to have built here. Then we're able to say, if there's another $2 million there, we're able to have planned capital expenditures or capital improvements that you don't need to go out to borrow or you have a source of funding for. But obviously, the most important thing now, because of the bond rating and being able to have the possibility of increasing our rating, that allows us to save money long-term over the years when we do go out to borrow, if we're going to build a new high school or do something with a cemetery or whatnot. That's, I think, the most important thing, and that's sort of us relearning things, including myself, of being involved in government where, a short time ago, for a decade, we were passing budgets that had structural deficits in the budget, meaning we weren't funding expenses and we were spending more than what we had, and then hope to figure out where the money would come from using free cash as a source of operations. And that's something that should be, very rarely done. Should be more of one-time type expenses and things that are unexpected. So that's sort of an overview of that. Just to talk about the articles very quickly, Article 3 has to do with elections. And as you know, we have a seat to fill, and there's going to be 2 elections, and that's the estimated cost, so we can stay in front of it and have an appropriation for that. Article 4 has to do with the clerk's position. Town clerk is opening up, and we want to be able to bring somebody in and have that one-time cost of training that person to be able to take up the job and learn it while both of them are there. And that's about $16,000 that we're estimating for 12 weeks. Article 5 is the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, something that we haven't had for 20 years. That's very important to the town, that's another indicator or another test that they look at as far as when the bond rating companies are looking at the flexibility and stability and the financial health of the town, and that's something that's very important. Article 6, as you remember from last budget, was some articles that came up about some ADA issues, particularly at the Belmonte and the high school. We went ahead and did that, and we talked about that we'd be looking to fund those as out of the free cash, if available, to replenish the building maintenance so that we can continue with building maintenance issues. Article 7 has to do with the cemetery. Article 8 has to do with a backhoe. The Finance Committee talked about that at the cemetery, and that's not a case of whether they need one. That's a case of just putting ourselves in a position that would be best suited to be able to look at with the capital improvement plan within a few months. We'll have a better idea of all the capital equipment and be able to be in a position to probably look at maybe possibly leasing or a town-wide a purchase of equipment with a sort, looking at how we would fund that through a borrowing or a debt exclusion. So those. Again, that's not something that's something that is definitely needed, as well as many equipment in many of the departments. So that's all I have this evening. Do have Peter Frazier, if you indulge him, to address the town.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. If I could, I was negligent here on this motion. Do I have a second? Thank you. Seconded. At this time, Mr. Frazier, if you'd like to come forward. If you would, just give your name and...
Sure.
Oh, yes.
My name's Peter Frazier. I'm a Senior Vice President at First Southwest Company in Boston. First Southwest works with about 180 Massachusetts municipalities. I've been working for about the last 28 years here in Massachusetts helping communities with their borrowing needs. And first, I'd like to thank Town Manager Crabtree for inviting me to speak with you all. He thought it would be helpful to have a brief overview of municipal bond ratings, sort of what they are and how they impact your borrowing, as well as some of the factors that are considered when the bond rating agencies analyze your credit. And here we go.
Forward and back buttons.
Thank you very much. Let's see if I... there we go. And that's you. Okay, so In terms of bond ratings, what are a bond rating? It's essentially an opinion from a bond rating agency, and you've probably heard of them. It's Moody's Investors Service, Standard & Poor's, Kroll, and Fitch. In Massachusetts, it tends to be either Moody's or Standard & Poor's, and it's basically their opinion on the creditworthiness of a particular issuer, in this case, the town of Saugus, and essentially how risky is your debt as an investment versus everybody else that's rated out in the marketplace. And it's used by market participants to determine the price of securities, essentially the interest rates that are bid at the time you originally go out and borrow money. And it's also used by the secondary market, investors, to get a gauge of how risky is one investment versus another one. It's important to keep in mind that the rating is actually paid by the community as part of a cost of issuance when they go out and borrow, but it's really for the protection of the investors. Again, to give them a shorthand way of ranking, say, your debt versus anybody else's that's rated in the marketplace. With respect to the ratings themselves, they're these sort of alphanumeric codes, if you will, the highest being AAA. This is obviously the rating scales for Moody's and Standard & Poor's. They start at AAA, which is the highest rating, the strongest rating, down to the BAA or BBB. There are actually ratings below that, but those are non-investment grade. That's junk bond status, which fortunately there are no junk bond issuers in Massachusetts. And you can see that Saugus currently is sort of right there in the middle at A2. In terms of this is a graph of yield curves by rating, and you can see the AAA rating has the lowest, and these are interest rates as a function of time by rating category. So meaning that if you were a AAA issuer, the interest rates you'd get on a 20-year bond would track along that bottom line. And this is a snapshot in time. Interest rates change, but on this particular day, versus, say, the BAA curve, which is the highest, meaning that the higher the credit rating, the lower the interest cost. And you can see the yellow represents an A-rated community, such as yourselves. So there's an opportunity by raising your credit rating to lower your borrowing costs closer to either the AA curve or the AAA curve. In terms of the value of ratings, obviously the higher the credit rating, the lower the borrowing cost, but not only is your cost lower, there are more participants that are eager to bid on, to participate in a sale for a higher rated credit. So there's better market access. In terms of the difference between those rating categories, that's referred to as the quality spread, the interest cost difference between them, and to sort of translate that into dollars and cents as opposed to just interest rate. You know, these are hypotheticals, but it essentially gives you a sense of the relationship. So if you're a AAA credit on this hypothetical $10 million 20-year issue, it's going to cost you over the life of the loan about $228,000 less than if you were a AA credit. And if you were a single A credit, the other way of looking at it is that borrowing costs you in interest about $1.4 million, call it $1.5 million, more than if you were a AAA credit. And if you were a BAA credit or a BBB credit, it'd be about $3.3 million over the life of that $10 million borrowing. So it really adds up. It's real money that we're talking about in terms of the value between those credit ratings. And the other value is that it's an unbiased expert assessment of the town's well-being. And so there's some value in terms of when you get that credit rating, you're getting essentially a report card, at least from the credit rating agency's view, of that may have insights that are helpful to management in terms of how things might be improved. In terms of the rating agencies look at a myriad of different factors or statistics, criteria when they're doing that analysis, but they generally fall within four broad categories: economy, debt, management, and finances. And with respect to the first two, in terms of the economy, very little control in terms of the town has very little control on the economy or on its existing debt or long-term obligations. So it's really in terms of the sort of the proactive things that can be done in the management category as well as the finances. In terms of when they're looking at the economy, they're looking at a whole host of trends with respect to local, regional, national, and global economic indicators. They look at your tax base, what the size of it is, the composition, how much commercial, how much residential, and so forth. They're looking at how much growth you've got in your tax base, or perhaps shrinkage. Employment measures, unemployment, how much business activity, whether businesses are moving in or moving out. Demographics, wealth indicators, things like your per capita income. Other wealth indicators would be home value, for instance, and trends in home values, building permits, tax collections, a whole bunch of things in that category. With respect to debt, they're looking at debt and other long-term obligations, which I'll touch on in a second. But when they look at your debt, they're looking at the actual amount of your existing debt and proposed debt. They're also looking for, well, what are the sources of revenue supporting that debt service? You know, is it exempt from Prop 2.5, so you've got revenues that you can draw on? Is it supported by enterprise, water or sewer enterprise, which you have some flexibility with respect to rate setting? Or is it tax supported within the levy limit, where in Prop 2.5, you have that levy ceiling? So adding more means that you either have to take away from some other line item in order to afford the debt. The amortization is something they look at, and that being the term of the debt. Are you stretching your debt out to the maximum? Clearly, they don't want you to borrow longer than the useful life of the asset, so they'll be looking at that. Offsetting aid payments and subsidies obviously come into play, but the other major categories with respect to sort of long-term obligations are your unfunded pension liability and OPEB liability, OPEB being other post-employment benefits, essentially retiree health obligations that the town is accruing on behalf of its employees, and which in both cases is a considerable liability in the future. And the idea here is sort of what are the non-discretionary obligations that the town is facing. With respect to management, they're looking at for best practices. They want to see procedures and policies with respect to budgeting and forecasting, capital planning. You know, part of it is they want to, again, if you think about the idea of the bond rating is really to give the investor some insight as to, you know, the risk or the reliability, if you will, of the community. They want to see multi-year budgeting. They want to understand what the budgeting assumptions are. Are you being very conservative? Are you being, you know, sort of, are you practicing wishful thinking in your budget assumptions? Both with respect to revenues and expenditures. They like to see forecasting. They want the higher rated communities are forward looking. They're anticipating what's around the next corner. For capital planning, they want to see that capital needs are being identified in advance and a plan being formulated to meet those needs over time, as well as identifying their funding sources. With respect to policies, they like to see reserve policies, debt policies, and also to understand the frequency with respect to how often are the decision makers in the community being provided performance reports, and how often are they being reviewed and acted on. And finally, we get to finances, and I think that's what relates to your Article 2. And this is about a 30% weighting in the formulation of the rating. And they're looking for the amount and type of reserves, and they often look at it because they're comparing with communities across the nation of different sizes. They look at it on a ratio basis as a percent of reserves. And the things that they're looking at is your undesignated general fund balance, or unassigned fund balance as it's being called now, and your stabilization funds, because that represents your financial cushion, your financial flexibility. They're also looking for structural balance. Are you depending on one-shot revenues, or are your recurring revenues adequate to fund recurring expenditures? In terms of the ratio analysis, in Massachusetts, the higher grade credits tend to have 10% or more of their revenues in those categories. Nationally, it's higher than 20% for the higher rated credits, but because Massachusetts is relatively wealthier than most of the country, we are able to essentially do well with less, and also the now 30 years of Prop 2.5 has made, I think, Massachusetts better financial managers, I think, as well as we have very stable tax base, relatively speaking, in terms of our dependence on real estate taxes and relatively stable state aid, as opposed to other parts of the country that rely on sales tax and gas tax and energy taxes that tend to be more volatile. So we get to sort of the punchline here, which is, why rating agencies view reserves favorably. And again, it's a measure of financial flexibility. It provides resources to meet unanticipated expenses, but it also helps stabilize town employment and service delivery. Laying off people is really expensive. You lose the service provided by the person, but there are also all sorts of legacy costs associated with it. When you have to rehire people, they don't have the same experience, and their training costs associated with it. So it's a pretty inefficient way to manage, at least from the rating agency's standpoint. And another aspect, although in today's interest rate environment with interest rates so low, reserves don't generate a whole lot of interest income, but in more normal economic times, it can be a recurring revenue source as well. And finally, by way of reserves, enhance credit ratings, which enhance market access and lower borrowing costs. And I hope I didn't go too far over time, but I turn it back over to the moderator, or?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Fraser? All right, thank you, Mr. Fraser.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Article 2? Yes, Ms. Panetta.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to come here and stand before you this evening in support of this article. 2 years ago, we were all concerned about the Essex Street Fire Station closing, along with the library, the Youth and Rec Center, and the Senior Center. And today, we're in the enviable position of being able to put $1 million into our stabilization account, which will help us, as we just heard, with our bond rating and ensure that we have funding if something unforeseen happens. Financial policies and procedures proposed by the manager were adopted by the Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Resolving past financial issues have been collective and collaborative effort that all of us, everyone in this room, everybody watching, should be proud of. As a result of these efforts, we are moving ahead with the capital improvement program. If we decide to borrow to implement such a plan, the improved bond rating will lower borrowing costs, saving taxpayers money. Saugus is on the right track. And as a finance director, I truly appreciate the work of this administration, the Finance Committee, and each and every one of you. So I'm sure that we're going to continue this success. So let's stay on the course of fiscal responsibility and realize what we all know is possible for Saugus. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Panetta. Any other discussion on Article 2? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to call the question? Or call the question. We'll do this by show of hands. The tellers will take the count. All in favor of Article 2, appropriating a transfer of the available funds from free cash, the amount of $1 million transferred to the stabilization fund, signify by raising your right hand. $18 on the left, 22 on the right, that's 40. All opposed? Raise your right hand. None. So we have, that motion is passed unanimously. I have, if I could have the tellers come forward, just a handout. You may have received this, or should have received this at home, but in case anyone didn't, it's just kind of an overview from the town manager on the financial articles before us this evening. All right, as a courtesy to the town manager, Ms. McLaughlin moves Article 3 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of providing a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2014 election and registration salary and expense appropriation to fund upcoming special elections. Said funds will be added to Article 2 as voted in the 2013 annual town meeting. Proposed by the town manager. Do I have a second? Any discussion on Article 3? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for the question. We can do this with a voice vote, we'll do a voice vote unless it turns out to be questionable, at which point we can go to a show of hands. But all in favor of passing Article 3, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Article 3 passes unanimously. Ms. McLaughlin, as a courtesy to the town manager, moves Article 4 for consideration to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of providing a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2014 town clerk salary appropriation to hire a new town clerk and provide for training. Said funds will be added to Article 2 as voted at the 2013 annual town meeting, proposed by the town manager. Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion on Article 4? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of Article 4 to transfer funds? Actually, I'm going about this backwards. Should be doing this really from because we have the amounts here too from the Finance Committee. So, on the recommendation of the Finance Committee to appropriate $16,000 to the town clerk salary appropriation to provide funds to hire the new clerk and allow time for training. All in favor of that transfer, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Article 5. As a courtesy to the Finance Committee, Ms. McLaughlin moves Article 5 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of providing a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2014 town manager expense appropriation to engage the UMass Collins Center to assist in the preparation of a 5-year capital improvement program. Said funds will be added to Article 2 as voted at the 2013 annual town meeting. And it is the recommendation of the Finance Committee to appropriate the amount of $37,000 with the source of these funds being from free cash. Any discussion on the motion? On the article? Yes, Mr. Long. Do I have a second, by the way, on Article 5? On the motion? Thank you. Mr. Cox.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, on the article, a couple of things. I noticed we have a handout, and it does talk or address the Collins Center. But I'm wondering, what was the selection process used to select the Collins Center? And what will be the process that they will use to to bring together the capital improvements that are believed to be necessary by the selectmen versus the capital improvements that are going to be considered necessary by the school department, and how will we resolve any priority issues that come about? I think the capital improvement program of 1995 is about to end, and that capital improvement program resulted in the renovations here, the library, the senior center, the public safety building, DPW, 20 years ago for $20 million. But as we look towards the future, it seems that we were in such bad shape. The schools at that time got really nothing. They got a couple of $100,000 to fix the auditoriums at the middle school and the high school. Other than that, they got very little. But we have been talking about having a new high school, and my concern is that despite the money we're putting into stabilization, despite the money that we seem to be accruing in free cash, that, in a sense, will disappear very shortly should we get into any kind of a major funding issue. So what I'm asking is, one, how do we select the Collins Center? And two, what's the process that they're going to use? Will it be a public process to bring everybody into a discussion on this? And it seems to me that if they do this properly, even the amount of money that we're talking about here, the $30,000, may not be necessarily enough to complete a really good detailed study of what's necessary. We haven't done something like this in a long time. And also, too, is this going to include the capital equipment that is really in very rough shape in this town? So I'd like to hear from somebody on what those queries that I have. Thank you.
Yes.
Coming from free cash. Just make it clear to the town meeting. I think it's their intent that that's where it's coming from. Treasurer collector just raised that question. I'm not sure if it was clear when you read it to them that it was coming from free cash.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Town Manager, did you want to field that?
Thank you. Good evening. As far as the UMass Collins Center, we did make some inquiries. This is a nonprofit. Collins Center is a nonprofit organization that was established for specific purposes of assisting municipalities, and fairly new in the last few years, as you know, named after Ed Collins, that was the former selectman and town manager here. The cost, if you wanted to go out private, is well over $100,000 for something like this. To follow up on the question, is that this is a total town-wide capital improvement plan, and the reason why it's even $37,000, which is not a lot of money compared to the work that they're putting into this, is the fact that we don't have, because we haven't done any capital improvements or planned anything over the last 20 years, is that we don't have a list of inventory, so they're going to be doing inventory and also doing an assessment of the condition of the assets, as well as a town-wide equipment condition, life of the equipment as part of that, as well as parks, playgrounds, and athletic fields will be included in the school buildings. So that's what it will include for those monies, to answer that question. Also, the process, that's something that, as you know from the charter, lies with the manager and the Board of Selectmen, and that's something that will be, charged in the charter to put a capital improvement plan together. So that process will be discussed and gone through, but essentially it's up to the selectmen and the manager, as you know from the charter, as well as the manager, dealing and being in charge of the town buildings and assets. So that's something that will probably move through that in setting a process and having input as far as setting priorities. The main thing at this point is putting together, the information and data and starting a collection process. As far as setting the priorities and what's affordable, that would be up to the manager and the selectmen to support that, because obviously I think, we're not hiding the ball here, because it's been discussed at length at many selectmen's meetings, and I think at many of all different meetings, and that to fund something like this, it's going to include a debt exclusion. So that's something that the Board of Selectmen will have to be on board moving through the process, so that ultimately it'll be up to the town meeting, which will have to vote for that source of funding, as well as up to eventually the residents, as we have done in the past with capital improvements.
Just for clarification also, well, actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Pileski. Mr. Pileski, could you come up for a second? Only because I noticed it's not in the minutes of the Finance Committee, but the question came up as to the source of funds for Article 5 would be free cash?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, we did have a hearing on Thursday night, and I sorely missed my good friend from Precinct 9, who generally attends our meetings. But I believe that a lot of those questions were answered at that time that he raised. I was most concerned to make sure they were nonprofit and that we weren't in a position where we couldn't afford to continue. I know it's a work in progress. I think one of their recommendations already was to move the cemetery into the DPW. Right. So they have been making some headway. Bring up a good point. I don't know if 37,000 is going to be enough to complete it, because it's a pretty far-reaching program. And also to answer the town meeting member's question, yeah, capital equipment is going to be part of that, and I believe that all of the department heads are going to be meeting with Collins Center. So it's going to be an integrated process, and I don't believe the Finance Committee would have supported it hadn't they believed it was a worthwhile effort going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Article 5? Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor of Article 5, the appropriating or transferring from free cash $37,000 for the purpose of this supplemental appropriation for the UMass Collins Center to prepare the 5-year capital improvement program, please signify by raising your right hand. The tellers will take the count. $39 in favor, all opposed? Article passes. As a courtesy to the Finance Committee, Ms. McLaughlin moves Article 6 for consideration to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of providing a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2014 building maintenance expense appropriation to replenish funds used for installation of equipment at the Ballard School for improvements and ADA compliance. Said funds will be added to Article 2 as voted at the 2013 annual town meeting. Do I have a second? Any discussion on Article 6? Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor of Article 6, transferring, it is the Finance Committee's recommendation voted to appropriate and transfer $42,770 for this purpose. Said funds to be added to Article 2 as voted at the 2013 annual town meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? The ayes have it. Article 6 passes. We were asked, as a courtesy to the Finance Committee, if we could take all of the financial articles at once as opposed to splitting them up here. So what that would mean is a motion at this time to take Article 8 out of sequence. Handle that, and then we can go back to Article 7. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor of taking Article 8 out of sequence, please signify by raising your hand. If the tellers would take the count, we need a 2/3 majority. That's 40 in favor. Opposed? Okay. Article 8, as a courtesy to the Cemetery Commission. Ms. McLaughlin moves Article 8 for consideration to see if the town will authorize the funding from free cash not to exceed $120,000 to purchase a replacement backhoe that is customized for the size needed for the cemetery. Do I have a second on the motion? Okay. At this time, I have a couple of handouts here, too. If I could have the tellers come forward. Actually, no. There are actually 4. We'll do these at once, because that's on the backhoe, and then these are on the cemetery issue right after it, so. Yeah, one second. You got that? Okay. Yes, so who would? No. Right. No, I didn't. Right. Yes. So then the first person to get up to speak on. All right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yep. Give me 1 second. Actually, just to, on advice of our counsel here, and I thank you for that, referring this to the FinCom recommendation, the FinCom recommendation on this was actually to refer this to the town manager, who, as I understand it, was in some discussion with the Cemetery Commission. I don't know if, Scott, if you want to get up and speak on this, or?
I should speak on this.
I think the issue is that it's not on the table.
I understand that. That was true at the Finance Committee meeting. The town manager and I and the DPW director, Brendan, were trying to get the cost for the Finance Committee meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't have it for that night, so some of the data was missing, so they really didn't have a choice to get the data that night to make so the decision at that night was, the only one they could make, because they didn't have all the data, was to refer it to the town manager. To the town manager, not back to the town manager. I do have all the data now, so I think it's appropriate, and you guys will have to make that decision, to go ahead and give the town meeting members the data, so they can make a decision whether they should refer it back to the town manager or put it on the table for a vote. I have the data now.
One moment. Okay. An odd situation here, because again, the Finance Committee, while I think they understood the need to have this brought up and didn't want to postpone it indefinitely, didn't have enough information in front of them to go ahead and approve an appropriation for this. So The recommendation of the Finance Committee was to refer this back to the town manager. So what we would need at this point is a motion from the floor to appropriate the $120,000. And what that would do is simply open it for discussion so that we can have a presentation, we can talk about it, and then we can ultimately vote on it. But unless there's a motion before us to appropriate the money, we can't do anything at this time. Mr. Long moves for the appropriation of the sum up to $120,000. We have a second. We're now open for discussion, and if you would care to make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, town meeting. As I said last Thursday, I think it was Thursday or Wednesday, when we met with the Finance Committee, unfortunately, the DPW director didn't have all the figures in, but we do have them now. So I just want to go through the history. This backhoe has been on the capital improvement list for us, the budgets I've been doing for the last 11 years. We have some major problems with the backhoe. We have leaks in hydraulic pistons, which the workers have to only fill it so high so that the hydraulic fluid's not leaking all over the graves. And what happens when they're digging is, for lack of a better term, the boom becomes limp and comes down because it doesn't have enough hydraulic fluid and they have to keep filling it. We have a lot of sway, 5 inches of sway in it because the rocker arm swing frame is worn, so we get 5 inches of play. It's stuck in second gear, the transmission is gone. The front loader is rusted and needs to be replaced. The instrumentation panel inside the backhoe is gone, and the swivel seat that goes back and forth from the front loader to the backhoe needs to be replaced. The repair cost, and I just got the rest of the cost today, and hopefully the DPW director sent that to you as well, town manager. But the transmission repair alone is $46,000. The instrumentation panel, seat, front loader, and floor front loader, and the floor repair is about $20,000. And the horizontal stabilizers and the swing frame is $33,000. The total cost to repair that unit is $99,000. We have a quote from JCB. It's a little old, that's why we put in $120,000. But the basic machine to replace it is $98,000. The needed accessories, including an icebreaker, is $18,000. So for a new machine, it's $116,000. And JCB, I don't know why they did this because the unit is pretty much junk, is offered $8,000 trade-in. So the cost of a new unit would be $108,000. So if you look at the repair cost versus the new cost, it's 92% of the new cost to repair it. I won't speak for the DPW director because he's not here, but I can guarantee you he uses around 50%, or some of us use 70% when we do repair costs before we do not go to repair. This is way too much money to repair. I think the town manager would tell you it needs to be repaired. There's no argument there. I think the Finance Committee realizes that. The problem the other night was I didn't have these figures, so the Finance Committee couldn't make a good judgment of whether this money should come out of free cash. There's nothing that stops it from coming out of free cash. I'm not opposed to the capital improvement plan. I've told the town manager in public that I'm 110% behind him and the DPW director and the superintendent's going through with this capital improvement plan. But I think this backhoe needs to be repaired now, and why repair it for 92% of the cost of a new one? So I'd like to see this done sooner than later. And, the town manager can go up and talk about it if you like.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? No? Any other discussion, Mr. Manager?
Thank you. I think we're all definitely in agreement that the backhoe at the cemetery needs to be replaced rather than repaired. We just got some of the information on the repair. But I think part of it is the, unfortunately, the article was submitted, wasn't discussed, because we probably would have looked at putting different language in to give more options. I think part of it is that, from a standpoint of planning, I think it's a matter of when and how we get there to replace it. And having the more information as far as town-wide equipment, and probably putting that together with a larger purchase, or even a lease option, is something that needs to be looked at. And we just don't, that information we're not at and do not have at this time. The other option that we've thrown around, speaking with the DPW director, is the possibility of a mini excavator might be better suited there, and that's something we haven't vetted out. But it's a matter of, for me, of having a larger plan in place to be able to put a replacement and purchase a replacement or lease a replacement on a larger scale town-wide. And I think the second part is obviously the source of funding. The free cash is problematic because part of us depositing the money into the stabilization and having a certain amount left over in free cash to be able to deal with snow and ice and pay for it in the year it is. Obviously, that's a concern at this point, to make sure that we have those monies available, not knowing if they'll be available, and I'm not sure. I certainly don't think it's probably the best use as far as a one-time cost rather than a purchase, rather than possibly a lease or a larger purchase. So that's what I would say we're trying to get. I guess the problem is that I think, as everybody is aware, we really haven't made any capital purchases on equipment or done any capital, on buildings other than the Belmonte in many years. And the needs are very great with all the departments, and everybody wants to get somewhere quickly. That's sort of the problem, is that we're trying to get there quickly, but also make sure that we're doing this proactively and sort of have a plan that moves forward. So I think those are the challenges, but I'm confident that within a few months, we're going to have the information to be able to prioritize and put things in and possibly get better prices and a better use of funds to make a town-wide equipment purchase. But that's where I think we're left, and if there's an emergency that ends up happening with it, as you're aware, we do have $100,000 that's in the finance reserve fund in case we needed to make that a decision sooner than that. But that's part of having a capital improvement plan and an equipment replacement plan that we don't have, and we're sort of trying to get there as quickly as we can, because it's far better financially to have plans and how you're going to fund things and have things lined up than to have sort of emergencies that happen and then try to figure out where to pay them from. But that's where I'm on it, and we're committed. I'm committed to. I think it needs to be replaced, but it's a matter of getting all the data and making the best choice or the right choice with all that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Article 8? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for a vote. The motion is before us to authorize funding from free cash not to exceed $120,000 to purchase a replacement backhoe customized for the needs of the cemetery. All in favor signify by raising your right hand. I'll ask the tellers to take the count. All opposed? Eight in favor of and 31 opposed. Article 8 is defeated. What's that?
Was that the main motion, or does it will get referred to the manager?
That was the motion that was before us was to expend the money. Okay. Please, Mr. Long.
We just voted on a referral. That's which comes in the board. Now it comes on the motion to actually, as I made earlier, actually buy a piece of equipment.
Margaret, that's not what I understood. We were voting on the
One moment. Okay. Okay. What we just voted on wasn't actually, as Mr. Long pointed out, the main motion that was before us, which was the recommendation of the Finance Committee. What we voted on was, it was actually, should have been proposed as an amendment to the motion to go ahead and expend up to $120,000 to purchase this, and that amendment failed. So the motion now before us is the recommendation of the Finance Committee to refer the matter to the town manager for consideration, for further action. We're voting now to refer the matter to the town manager. Please.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, my question is on the motion to refer it to the town manager, and therefore I have a question for the town manager. This piece of equipment obviously needs to be replaced, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is from the Finance Committee hearing is that the capital improvement plan would be ready late April and May. So would it be your intention that we could have something before us to resolve this by the annual town meeting, whether it be with the language that you may feel most appropriate, such as lease purchase, or I happen to believe that by purchasing this with an aggregate of other equipment, we'd leverage a better price and do better in the market. So my concern is, is there a high likelihood that you will bring this back to us by the annual?
Well, I think it's difficult to make those type of commitments, but I would suggest that something needs to be done, and I'm committed to doing something with that at some point when we have more information to be able to decide that, because it's clearly needs to be replaced. But, without getting into details, there's other equipment in other departments that is in dire need of the same issues and same replacement. So we'd be looking at something and hopefully look at the annual. That's correct.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Costa.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very confused. I thought I was voting on one thing and I ended up voting on another thing. But anyhow, if this piece of equipment is in such terrible condition, are we approaching the time when we're going to need a subcontractor to come in and do the work? Okay, and I was going to ask how much that would cost if we indeed had to do that. Seems like time would be important.
Just to address that, we're not at that point. I think if we get to that point, there's other options if the equipment fails. I think part of it is also where, as everyone's aware, we did have a study done with the DPW that talks about the merging and reorganizing some of the departments. So that's part of, I think, of what strategically we're looking at and discussing, which would be part of an equipment purchase, whereas we may purchase a backhoe there that would also be shared and used with the DPW, and those are the things we sort of want to vet out, I think, and be able to have a plan in place. So if that answers your question. Hopefully, it's, there's two tracks that are moving, and we're just hoping to get to I think we're at a much better advantageous position if we make the decision when those two axes cross, and we're not there at that point yet, but we're getting there as quickly as possible.
Any other discussion on Article 7? Okay, hearing none. Again, the motion that's before us at this time is the original motion from the Finance Committee to refer the matter to the town manager. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, the next motion before us is Article 7. And as a courtesy to the Cemetery Commission, Ms. McLaughlin moves Article 7 for consideration. To see if the town will vote to transfer the care, custody, and control of 63.3 acres of Town of Saugus property located on Assessor's Plan Number 1038, known as the Curley property, which currently may be used for school or municipal purposes, to the Cemetery Commission to be used as a future cemetery for Saugus residents. And I know that the tellers did pass out a handout on this, or a couple of handouts, I believe, to you. Do I have a second on the motion? Okay. We have a brief presentation by the maker.
Yeah, also. Thank you. Before I start, first of all, I have David Crispin, who has 40 years' experience, and he's done 75 communities in the same type of studies and the same type of problem we have of running out of cemetery space. So I have him as an expert if we have any questions as we go through. But for the new town meeting members, I just want to give you a quick snapshot before I go quickly through the presentation of what's been going on at the cemetery. We ran out of veterans' graves, we ran out of child graves, and we didn't have any place for cremations several years ago. The Cemetery Commission, along with the superintendent, put in columbariums. You've probably seen the veterans one, the very pretty one down at the veterans area. We got another columbarium on the right-hand side as you come in that end of the cemetery for cremations. Those cremations, before we did that, used to take up grave sites. So we were eating up grave sites like crazy. Now if you're cremated, you go in one of the columbariums so you don't take up the grave site. That's one of the ways we delayed running out of space at the cemetery. We put in child graves that will last for decades, and we also put in a veterans grave site over here in Saugus Center, where we have 110 grave sites that'll last for decades for veterans. So we took care of veterans, we took care of children, we took care of cremations. The only thing we didn't take care of is the graves, people that need actual grave sites. We have 155 grave sites left to sell. There's a lot of them that were sold years ago, pre-sold, so there's thousands of graves over there owned by residents or people that used to live here that don't. So there'll still be burials going on for a long time. But we only have 155 new ones, so anybody that doesn't own a grave site in Riverside, a resident that passes away, after about 2 years from now, what the study will show, we run out of grave sites and we will no longer be able to bury Saugus residents in the town of Saugus. So that's the background. So why are we here? Review the important information. Review the important information, respond to the questions you may have, and again, I have the article, we have the property I'm going to show you, and the process we're going to go through. By the way, I hope everybody get their package at home that I mailed to you all a couple weeks ago. And again, I had already talked about David, he's here, and I already told you that he's, his background of 40 years. One of the things that we all took as an oath of office, even in the commissions and boards, is that we swear to hold up the Massachusetts general laws. Well, there's a Massachusetts General Law 114, I think you've heard me say this many a times, Section 10, which says each town shall provide one or more suitable places for the intimate of persons dying within its limits. So we as a cemetery commission, I believe you as the town meeting, have an opportunity to fulfill that general law. And we have a responsibility to do that. We must provide space for our residents for burial. Like I said before, there's 155 grave sites left. 155 grave sites left. That's about 2 years at the rate we're going. 4 years ago at town meeting, we talked about this, but now the crisis is coming. Over 50% of the Saugus residents who voted in the past town election expressed their desire to have the town cemetery at the Curley property. And to be honest with you, we didn't do any publicizing of the town ballot because I got the language like 2 weeks before, and unfortunately I didn't get a chance to put it in the advertiser because I was shut out because I guess it's a law, you can't do it within 2 weeks. Anyway, it showed that the town's wanted. Everybody I talked to in the town of Saugus wants to have a place to be buried in the town of Saugus when they pass away. The Curley property is the only town-owned property that will hold a cemetery. You talk about the 63 acres, but when you go through the 63 acres and you look at all the wetlands, I'm going to show you a little schematic here shortly, and I did give you a handout. If you look on the top right of that handout, you'll see the Curley property is identified up in the top right there. All that blue is wetlands. And that doesn't count the buffers you have to put around those wetlands. There's 100 feet on regular wetlands, you have to go 100-foot buffer for the Conservation Commission, and on the rivers, you have to go 200 feet. So we add that on to all that blue in here, and you don't have much land. So what land is available? Well, to excavate, there's about 8 acres right there after you do excavation. There's a couple of acres in here that could be developed right away. Those couple of acres could last several years before we need to have the excavation done. So if this was turned over to the cemetery, we could immediately start doing the plans. I'm going to go through some of this other stuff. Now, the stuff I sent you at home, the wildlife and all that stuff, we've done the studies on that. It doesn't impact wildlife. It doesn't impact runoff water, wells, or anything like that. Again, there's about 2 acres that we could use right away. There's about 8 acres we could do after excavation. And there's some other little peninsulas that we could use eventually if we needed to. There's little pieces of property here and there, but it's not for anything else building. Now, I know the schools have talked about trying to put a school there. Well, the Saugus Middle School is on 16.7 acres of land. The high school is on 23.74 acres of land. The most land in one spot after excavation is 8 acres. There's no way you could put a school in there with athletic fields and all that stuff. It's just not conducive to a school. So in summary, I'm skipping through as fast as I can for you. We have a responsibility, as I said before, but more importantly, we have a responsibility for our residents. If we do the right thing here and pass this, after we go through about a year of going through all the boards and getting permits and doing all the plans and everything else, and maybe a year to get the cemetery ready, we could be ready just in about time when we run out of graves. But we'll have a grave sites for the next 100 years or so. Based on how many people are getting cremated, we can add columbariums, down here, there, not a problem at all. But for grave sites itself, it'd be about 100 years we could have graves. This is important to the Saugus residents. So you have the ability tonight to make this happen by voting yes. And again, here's all the boards and stuff. So this isn't going to be an overnight thing. If you vote yes tonight, we have many boards and commissions to go through. We'll have to hire somebody to do the final plans that we can submit to the Board of Health, to the Selectmen, to the Planning Board, and to all the commissions and stuff. So it's going to be a long, tedious process, but you have the opportunity to make that happen by voting yes tonight. Do you have anything you want to add? Last thing, a no vote, though, will prevent us from having this future grave sites, and it could be us. It could be one of us that doesn't have a grave, or one of your family members. Any questions?
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Okay, further discussion on Article 7. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, Town Manager, fellow members, ladies and gentlemen, I have a question on the cemetery. Have we, at one time, there was a plan we were going to move some of the streets and dig them up at the present cemetery and add more room for more burials because we had more streets there than we really need? And secondly, have we looked at the possibility of going across the tributary that runs down there into where our tree farm is, and take our tree farm and relocate it to the landfill that we now have behind the DPW, which is useless land but would be wonderful probably for a tree farm? And can we use that land to extend over and make that part of the cemetery?
All right, the second question first. We did look across the river, but it's, the elevation is such, it's not grandfathered into the elevation. You have to be 8 feet above water level. That doesn't meet it. So we can't put in-ground graves on across the way. One of the things we did look at was moving the garages over there. We could do that and put a bridge across, but when I got with Frank McKinnon, the conservation officer, we found out we had to go with the Army Corps of Engineers. The price was astronomical. There was no way we could get a bridge built across, otherwise you had to go all the way around the town to get there, but it can't be used for graves. Your other question about streets, yeah, we could, worst case, if we run into the last drop of graves, we could take, there's a plan, the superintendent laid out a plan for a couple of the streets, not all of them, a couple of streets that could be taken up and graves could be put in.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hi.
Good evening. Dave Crispin with the BSC Group. Just a comment to reclaiming roadways within cemeteries. I've done this before. It is an absolute last resort, and having been in your cemetery and looking at the rather limited area of roads that could be reclaimed, you might gain a couple of years, maybe 3 years, but not a great deal of time in that process. What I do advise to every cemetery, whether it's public, private, municipal, religious, whatever the brand is, if you have the ability to acquire a piece of land for use as a cemetery, whether it's a butcher cemetery or whether it's a totally new piece, make every effort to secure that land for your cemetery purpose. That's because people will be dying and need cemetery space forever. Cemetery land is finite. Generations sometime in the future will clearly thank a committee that moves forward to secure land for future cemetery space.
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen, the last speaker's comments are exactly what I wanted to speak to tonight. I feel very strongly that we should not support this article for that very reason. The land is finite. The bodies are forever. We might be able to do the short-term solution, but it is a short-term solution. How do we comply with Mass General Law when one generation from now, or whenever it takes to fill this expansion, also runs out? And then we're left in the same position that we are now, and that last substantial piece of open space is gone forever. I think we really need to do what Mr. Gould spoke of earlier. We need to do more in the way of creative planning with the cemetery that we have. And Mass General Law required that we have a cemetery, and we do. And I just think that since this is our last substantial piece of open space, we need to think long and hard about what we do with it for the living. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I want to say I agree with this article. After, this is a comprehensive report. We've gone down this road before. We've listened to the arguments before. The land that we're talking about isn't all that well suited for, oops, something jumped off the, isn't that well suited for many things. It would be well suited for a cemetery, but to the point that the previous speaker just made, one thing for certain is, I think it was Thomas Jefferson, two things are inevitable, and that's death and taxes. And the customers are going to keep dying to get in there. That's the way it's going to be. And eventually, somewhere down the road, we'll be faced with this problem again. I know all of this is highly regulated, but I don't know if you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gould, if you've looked into what like the European system. The Europeans, they've been burying people a lot longer than we have. The Native Americans buried a lot of people, and they used a different philosophy, and I don't know if we can approach that, like have timeshares, more or less. Basically, that's how they do it in Europe. You're buried for a certain amount of time, then they move the bones someplace else. And the Native Americans had communal burial grounds where you didn't have your own private land forever. You were there with the tribe and your brothers and sisters. So I was curious if there is any way that we could look down the road into changing laws that would allow us to rebury people in the lot, similar to what they do in Europe. Thank you.
Please.
You strike on an interesting idea, and unfortunately it's not regulated as the right word. What it is what do you folks traditionally like? United States, these are sacred grounds. Thou shalt not disturb. Even back to the Indians, if you discover an Indian burial ground, that is sacred ground. You do not disturb it. I think that mentality is still in the United States. Will it be there in 100 years? I don't know. But I think you have an opportunity, as I've advised to many other communities and many other cemeteries, to secure a piece of land, to take a step towards the day when perhaps the traditions change.
Any other discussion on Article 7? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting members, Mr. Chairman. It's a tough issue. I know that you're torn between the schools and the cemetery and the need for taking care of our departed. But you got to add a third one to our previous speaker spoke about death, taxes, and education. The town is in need of schools. We're giving away all of our school grounds already. You know, the North Saugus School was sold off as office condos. Other schools have been sold off as the condos on Lincoln Ave across from Cogliano's Plaza and housing for the elderly, stuff like that. And we need more schools. The high school needs to be built. Elementary schools are getting overcrowded. I know my father's grave was right across from the river down there, and it looks to me like the other side of the river is about 4 feet higher than the river. I've seen other towns where they've raised the elevation of the ground first, and then they put cemetery graves in there. So I would think engineering on those type of avenues may or may not be something we should look at. Like somebody else said, move the tree farm, you know, up to the DPW, and then develop that land for cemetery. That's the way I would go. And as I spoke to some members on the school committee, that I think that maybe some kind of a land swap, I heard in previous years about swapping this land with the DCR with a piece of breakheart, maybe not using that the Curley property for a school, but maybe another piece of property that may be swapped for that. So once, another speaker also said about once the land is gone, we have to think about our schools. So I would think at this point, either referring it back to the committee or voting it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Grabowski.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, as chairman of the cemetery commissioner is passionate about his charge, and that's to be appreciated. He takes his job very seriously, and I think we all respect him for that. But this land was set aside for the town use of municipal or schools. As the previous speaker said, I think we have to take into consideration our schools, our living, as well as our past members of the town. I would not be opposed, as a resident of the town, to get a unbiased engineering recommendation from the town possibly, or however it could be done, to tell us what actually can be placed on this property. And I think that would put the question to rest once and for all, if in fact a school can be built on that property. Another speaker said that, and I believe it was the past one, we've given away quite a bit of land or sold quite a bit of land. I don't know of how much space there is left in the town of Saugus for a school or for a cemetery or for open space or playgrounds. I don't know if the capital plan is going to address that, but I think we need to come up with some kind of inventory of what land is available and what that land can be used for. I believe I spoke to the previous moderator at one time about sending something to committee, and he told me never ever do it, it's a death knell. Well, I think we have an open space committee that is in this town, and I think that this could be forwarded to some committee to look at and come up with a definitive idea of what this property can be used for. Then you would have a better understanding of how to use it, and if it's a question of timing, we could also put a time limit as to when that open space committee or any other recommendation could come forward, and you would have a finite period of time to look at it and come forward. Again, I appreciate the engineering that the cemetery has commissioned, but it's for their purposes that engineering study was done. I think we need an unbiased opinion, and again, the previous speaker, in speaking to a lot of people, there was a discussion a while back about a land swap. That land, I think, is possibly contiguous to Camp Nyan. I'm not sure if it's continuous to Breakheart or not, but this would be a perfect opportunity to go to DCR and ask them if there would be an opportunity, if the town wanted to swap that land for a viable piece of property, because we had budget hearings last week, and it was made clear to the members of the school committee and the public that space is becoming an issue in the Saugus Public Schools. We're going to try to address that creatively, but if we give up all our space and we don't have any use of it, where are we going to get more? That's just my thoughts, and I would hope that we could put this off for a while and come up with a definitive answer as to if a school could be used there, and that certainly would benefit you folks in your decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on Article 7. Mr. Cox.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, members of the residents of Saugus. I have heard this going around for a number of years, and I just am somewhat confused in that we just keep hearing the same argument going around. Yes, we're running out of grave sites. I know that. Have we explored a mausoleum, which other towns have looked into? Maybe that could fit on the tree farm across the water, the river. I know that we need the graves. We had the vote this past election day. It wasn't what I call a overwhelming vote. It was just a few hundred, give or take, that passed it. Heck, we had an 80% positive vote on another article, and that hasn't been touched either. I think we're going a little fast here. I know you've got 2 years. 2 years you could build a mausoleum. You could do the study. I have a hard time also with the fact that, now granted I haven't crawled across the land up there, but the town has two departments, school and cemetery, and both are vying for the same property, like 100%. There's no sharing. You could put a mausoleum there and maybe some graves, and let the school have its property as best, or maybe a land swap where both can be satisfied in a similar manner. What I'm alluding to is the fact that the town should admonish itself for not having done this over the last few years, but be realistic in the fact that there's a better decision than all or nothing. I will accept the fact that graves are running out, that ultimately, wherever we go next for a cemetery, it's going to run out. That's why I suggest the mausoleum like they did have done in Malden. And I think that that's something which is more replenishable than actual land. And I really think, with all my heart and conscience, this really has to be looked at by professionals in a very long-term basis. Ultimately, if you run the scenario of we'll always need graves, we'll always have to take land, eventually there's going to be one house, maybe a couple of miles tall in town, and everything else is going to be a cemetery, taken by, eminent domain or whatever. So what I'm saying is the argument is going to resolve itself over the next 100 years. How? I don't know. But right now we have options on the table which could be used as an adequate substitute to what's being requested now. I think we're moving too fast for this. The town has to look at, do its homework, and it hasn't yet. It's one department that's done its homework, maybe another, both having their own biases involved in their presentations. So please, as I said, I would like to back away from this and request that we investigate new technologies such as mausoleums and ask if that's been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, fellow town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen, I'm one who would like to thank the Commission and Mr. Gould for all the work he's done. The report is not only unbiased, it's fair. This property's been in the control of the town for more than 40 years. If the town felt it the necessary to build something up there, they had more than ample opportunity to do so. They haven't because of the challenges presented by the property, and the challenges have been addressed by the Commission. This has been going on for 11 years. The Commission has been telling us time and time again, we're running out, we're running out, we're running out. We owe a responsibility not only to the children to educate them with new schools, but also to the people that are invested in this town for 40, 50 years by their taxes and wish to be buried with their fellow Saugonians. And I think this is the right place and the right time to do that. And I hope you'll support the article. Thank you.
Mr. Manoogian.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, I've supported it. I believe it was before us in 2009. This is a story that's echoing across Massachusetts, particularly because the baby boom generation is getting older and occupying limited space. I haven't heard Mr. Crispin comment about the 8 acres versus whatever. His message is consistent with what he said to the Boston Globe in October of 2009. I respect his credibility, and I certainly respect members of town boards and commissions when they put in their volunteer time and they make recommendations. I don't think they're doing it with any particular type of bias. That being said, last month was a difficult time, and as the moderator noted, my sister, her last request was to be buried in Saugus. And for 55 of her 65 years, she lived in Saugus. She went to school here and served this community, and for the last 10 years, she moved to Draycote, where she served that community. And when I was asked to look into this by my niece, I found that there is a rule. You can't buy a grave site unless you are a Saugus resident. And there's really, that's the rule. And I asked Dennis, you know, is there grave sites that are available? He said, the only way you can do it is if you find somebody that has a grave, a lot that they're not going to use. So, see John Falaska, sometimes people call and they want to sell grave sites. So I started learning about this, and I'm sure Mr. Crispin can talk about it. There's people marketing these things graves over the country. They're on Craigslist, not in Saugus. But fortunately, John Falaska knew of 2 people that had lots that wanted to sell those lots. And one woman was in Florida, and she was going to pass in Florida. It was her eventual wish, and she didn't want 2 lots here in Saugus. The family bought them in 1918, 6 lots for $600. And we agreed to a price, and she had been trying to sell these lots since July. But the point is, it's not like a car. You're not going to go out shopping for a lot when you're dead. You know, who's going to do that? And I suppose, and there were other lots there that people can sell. So we're actually facing a paradox, or a sort of an irony here, where people that have unused graves in multi-family lots will be able to sell them to people that aren't Saugus residents. And Saugus residents can be denied a gravesite. The ancient Greeks, and I said this in 2009, believed that a mark of a civilization, of a civilized community, was not only how you treat the living, but how you regard the dead. And I can't conceive that. Look at the decision that you're being asked to make tonight. You're being asked to make a decision to say that we're not going to provide graves for our residents. You could talk all you want about filling in opposite the river and building up, and you know, these graves have perpetual care. These people have deeds to these things. Perpetual care means that you're not going to bury someone else on top of it. They have allowed cremations to go on top of the grave. And that option was presented to the family, which my sister was not comfortable with. She wanted to be near my parents. And fortunately, I was able to find this family, this woman in Florida, that wanted to sell those 2 graves. And I was considering filing a disclosure with the town clerk, but Dennis and John Falaska assured me that this is a process that is open to anybody throughout the town, and it happens often. Well, I don't know how often, but it does happen frequently. So, in thinking about this, I will reiterate that we are going to a point where people aren't using their graves and can dispose of those graves to people that don't live in Saugus. I know there's a law that says 75 years that the cemetery commission can take them back, but that requires an inventory process and so forth. So I'm supporting this. I believe it's the right thing to do. Several years ago, we asked the school department, when we voted to refer the science lab to them about the new high school, to look at other parcels. And I don't know that they did. I know I have high regard for Roger Sacalato's report that he gave this town meeting in 2002. I don't recall that this site was high up on the list then. Now, I know the school committee will say, well, we didn't fund a study, $150,000 for a student plan or an assessment. To me, if we're going to do the high school, it's going to be at that site with flipping the property or whatever. And the reason why, that's a whole nother story, and I hope we can move forward on it. But, I can't envision a high school there busing every kid over the Walnut Street Bridge to get to that school. The Lyndhurst School, if that's the location, if you're going to rebuild it, what school would you build there? Who would you transport there? I don't see it happening, at least in our lifetime. So on principle and ethical and moral grounds, I will support this article knowing full well that it takes two-thirds, and the preponderance of discussion around me and in front of me is that it's probably not going to pass. Thank you, but we all will.
Thank you, Mr. Manoogian. Any other discussion? Article 7, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll be brief. Another parcel of land came to me when I was sitting there. Another town meeting told me about it. I believe it's Hidden Valley or Hidden Acres on the Linfield line. It's about 90 acres up there. It's pretty much landlocked and not too much use for anybody that lives in Saugus for development purposes in Saugus, so it's pretty good land up there, so I would think that might be a viable option for a cemetery. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting. The thing that you're not getting is, first of all, you're saying, oh, well, we'll move the tree farm up to the DPW and we'll plant trees on contaminated land or whatever it is up there. I mean, that's way, way beyond anything that we're talking about here, but it won't happen. Speaking of land, at the high school, to build a new high school, you have the land right there. So you swap it out, you put the field down here. At the middle school, you have land right there in the parking lot or on the other side. I mean, you don't want to mess around with the field there, but you're going to have to. And you could build both schools on both parcels of land and have the fields at the other land. You also have Stackpole Field down here. The cemetery has nothing. Nothing at all. This is it. This is what you have. This is what you're dealing with. When you die, I hope everybody already has their place because there's not going to be a place in Saugus. That's all I have to say. Thank you. But there's plenty of land for the schools.
Further discussion? Seeing none. At this time, we'll call for the question. This does require a two-thirds majority vote. We're going to do this by a show of hands. We have a request for a roll call vote, so we will do it by a roll call vote. So on Article 7, either yay or nay, and I will ask the town clerk to call the roll.
Can you explain the vote one more time, please?
Yes. This is on Article 7. The motion is to see if the town will vote to transfer the care, custody, and control of 63.3 acres of Town of Saugus property located on Assessor's Plan 1038, known as the Curley property, which currently may be used for school or municipal purposes, to the Cemetery Commission to be used as a future cemetery for Saugus residents. So a yes vote on this motion would do just that. It would transfer the property to the Cemetery Commission for use as a cemetery. A no vote would not transfer the property. What happens to the property then, it's would be the subject of a future motion of some kind, after further, I'm sure, deliberation and investigation. Yes?
Wouldn't it be required to take a vote first on whether we would have a roll call vote? That's how we've done it in the past.
No, we have one member who requested a roll call vote, so on the request of one member, a roll call vote is required.
In the past, it was 14 members.
No. It is only one member that's required, so we would have a roll call vote at this time. Yes.
Addabado? Brown? No. Ciccolini? Yes. Cottam? Yes. Decaro? No. Dockery? Yes. Finn? No. Rourke? Jones? Yes. Lopresti?
Yes.
McCarthy?
Yes.
Moses?
No.
Politano? No. Rando? No. Rossetti? No. Stewart?
Yes.
Vecchio? Bartolo? Yes. Cardinale, Connors, Cottam, Devlin, Doherty, Fowler, Garino, Lucy, Maltese, McLaughlin, Palzinski, Paracchio, Ring, Smith, Sweezy,
Yes.
Witten,
Yes.
Billingsley, Carlson, Costin,
Yes.
Cox,
No.
DiNardo, Falaska,
Yes.
Goodwin, Johnson, Long, Manugian,
Yes.
Mareshi, Paolini,
Yes.
Quinlan,
Yes.
Rodenheiser, Spencer,
No.
Travers.
With 22 votes in the affirmative, 18 in the negative, the article did not garner the two-thirds majority necessary to pass, so it is defeated. As a courtesy, actually as a courtesy to the Planning Board, Ms. McLaughlin moves Article 9 for consideration, to see if the town will vote to amend the town's zoning bylaws by adding a new Article 17 entitled Historic Mills Mixed Use Overlay District. As a courtesy to the moderator, I'm hoping someone will make a motion at this point to waive the reading of this 8-page legal size. We have a motion. Do we have a second on that? To waive the reading? Thank you. I appreciate that. I do have a report here from the Planning Board. In accordance... Oh, one second. Wrong one. The Planning Board did meet on this on January 16th at 7:15 p.m. in the Town Hall Annex Meeting Room. The Planning Board, after proper advertising, held a public hearing on this town meeting article, and the Planning Board, after consideration of the facts, does recommend the passage of this article. Signed by the 4 members, dated January 16th. I do have a couple of handouts. If I could get my tellers. There's actually 3 here. We have 3 handouts coming around, and there is a presentation on this also, I believe, right? PowerPoint? There we go. We have our presenter, Mr. Luongo, right? Yes. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting members, good evening. I'll try to be short and sweet. Hours late. The purpose of this presentation is go over the proposed the Saugus Historic Mills Mixed-Use Overlay District. As the moderator said, this was before the Planning Board. Planning Board voted in favor of this, recommend to town meeting. I'm just going to go over the slides briefly, then answer any questions that anyone has, and give town meeting members the floor to voice their concerns or opinions. Basically, the purpose of this overlay is twofold. It's really to protect historical cultural feature of the town of Saugus, which is the historic mills. And also, it's an identity for the town of Saugus, so it's to preserve that identity as well. As you know, the mill is, the Saugus Mills, in close proximity to the historic ironworks, which are really known, obviously, in the state and nationally as the first ironworks in the country. So this really is an extension of the ironworks to the extent it's part of the cultural resource of the town, and it gives the town its really historic identity. Mill districts are not new in Massachusetts. Currently, there are over 23 mill districts throughout the state, and these are some of the mill districts. Some of them, Lowell, Fall River, clearly important ones, but there are other ones as well. And these are just some examples of what mills look like when they're restored. This is the boot mill in Lowell. This is in Northbridge, Massachusetts. These are all, I believe these two are conversions into residential. The lofts at Lancaster Mills in Clinton, Mass., I think that is also residential. And the Clock Tower Place in Maynard, this is a commercial adaptive reuse of mill buildings. I believe they're mostly businesses in this mill district. This is an aerial view of two of the three mill buildings in Saugus that we're looking to include in the mill district. And this is a picture of the third one. This one is 222 Central Street. This is a rendering of what that mill building, could look like. And this is just a color rendering. Sorry for the lack of clarity on that. The history of the mixed-use mill district really isn't new. It actually first appeared about 10 years ago when the Metropolitan Area Planning Council did a community development plan for the town of Saugus. And in that plan, they clearly mentioned the mill district and the need for an overlay that offered incentives for a mix of uses for the district. And then it recently came up again in April of 2012, and hopefully someone else from town meeting will be giving a chronology of what has taken place during this period of time to educate the mill owners and the property owners and the residents around the area about the mill district. So clearly there's been a lot of outreach that has gone on to get to this point in the process of this zoning proposal. The mill district provides a number of opportunities. Without reading the 8 pages, these are some of the opportunities that present themselves if we adopt this mill district. It's a cultural asset. The zoning tries to protect that cultural asset. The revitalization of the mill districts can provide an economic boost to the entire community. Redeveloping mill buildings accomplish multiple smart growth goals at once. And some of those smart growth goals include reuse of existing structures, compact infill development, environmental restoration, and increase in housing and job opportunities. So those are some of the opportunities that create themselves in mill districts and what our zoning proposal is trying to do. The key concepts to our zoning proposal are the following. It preserves and protects the historic mills, increases economic development opportunity, protects the surrounding residential areas, maintains existing jobs and create opportunities for future job growth, create opportunities for affordable housing, provides access to the Saugus River where appropriate, and that's important. We have a great asset in the Saugus River, and not too many people can get to it and enjoy it. Not too many people even know it winds its way through the entire town. Also, the proposed zoning must comply with all applicable federal, state, and environmental and other regulations. So anyone who develops within this district is going to be subject to the Wetlands Protection Act, the Rivers Protection Act. It doesn't skirt any of the local, state, or federal environmental or any other regulations for that matter. Other key concepts include it's optional, so owner of the property does not have to opt into the district. He can keep his property under the current zoning. If he opts into the district, any new uses for those buildings or land have to conform to the new zoning. Any old uses that are there would be grandfathered in and would become non-conforming uses. They could stay there as long as they are viable. Once they leave, though, they would not be, those type of uses would not be allowed back in. Mix of uses and residential uses, so we're trying to encourage both as of right residential uses and mixed uses in the 3 historic mill properties. That is an incentive to whoever owns or wants to buy and develop those mill buildings to keep those mill buildings. So zoning is really adding a monetary benefit to anyone who wants to develop those buildings and try to make a profit out of it, but if they're making a profit, they have to preserve the structures. Other non-mill properties may obtain a mill mixed use, but they have to go before either or both the planning board for a special permit and or the board of selectmen, depending on the type of use. Other key concept is the planning board may adopt regulations for the implementation of this bylaw, including design guidelines. This is something new in Saugus that we're putting in here. We've set up some design criteria that we want adaptive reuse of existing mills to follow those guidelines. By that I mean no alteration of windows. So if a window is 12/12, we want the windows replaced as 12/12. We want the historic integrity of the building preserved. New construction should be sympathetic to the existing historic mill building. So, for instance, we don't want some real modern architecture next to a historic mill building. If someone is building new, we would encourage them to use brick and to keep the same overall design concepts of the mill building. Not mimic it, but at least to respect the materials used and the design of the existing historic mill buildings. It's a standalone. So basically, it still latches on to other requirements of the existing zoning. For instance, we require site plan review. Most anything that will take place in this district will have to go before the planning board for site plan review. And then, as mentioned, the uses that are authorized by the Board of Selectmen by special permit would still be required under this proposed zoning. So the historic mill properties are basically 3 mill properties, as seen in the slide. The district itself, and there's a map in the handout, and we'll be coming to it on the slideshow here, but the district has a mixture of uses. It has an industrial one, a heavy industrial, a multi-residential district, and a B1 district. And this is all within this small area, which is from 180 to 222 and 175 to 203 Central and 3 Appleton Street. 18 properties have all those mixtures of uses. So it's quite a mixture of uses that are allowed currently. If we do nothing tonight, then those uses stay in place, meaning there can be heavy industrial, light industrial, residential, and some retail in the Business 1 district. So this is the map area. The light purple is the light industrial zone. The heavy purple is the industrial heavy zone. The yellow is the multi-residential area. It's one property. And the salmon colored is the B1 district. So you can see how they're placed on the map, and that's all surrounded by R1. So all that white area around there is R1. So under this overlay district, the only thing that we are going to eliminate is the I2 district on the right-hand side will be, the only thing that will be allowed to develop on that site will be residential. So the property owner has agreed to give up his right to an I-2 development just to allow residential on that site. So no industrial will go on that site if this passes. That will only be for residential uses. Subject to all the restrictions that we have now with setback requirements from other residential areas. And there's also the setbacks from the river, which is a 200-foot buffer, and plus the wetlands also apply. So all these protections stay in place. So some uses currently allowed under the underlying zoning will go away if the property owner opts into the overlay district. And these are really undesirable uses that I don't think residents want to live next to anyways, but which are allowed currently in the zoning. So these are the prohibited uses under the proposed overlay: gasoline, oil stations, garages for storage and repair, auto showrooms and lots, commercial stables, commercial trailers, storage containers, one-story mini storage facility, and storage warehouses. Building material warehouses, fuel, feed, junkyards, automobile repair, sales, laboratory engaged in experimental or testing research. Those will be prohibited. Those are allowed right now. All the underlying dimensional and density regulations of the underlying zoning stay in place, except that we're allowing heights of 40 feet, 3 stories. Heights over 40 feet would be allowed by a special permit from the Board of Selectmen. And we're also allowing more than one principal structure may be permitted on a lot by special permit from the Board of Selectmen. Currently, our zoning only allows one principal building on a lot, no matter how large or how small the lot is. And there can be no relief from that. So this would require some relief. It gives some flexibility while still protecting the integrity of the residential neighborhoods as well. How is that being protected? Because the other dimensional setback requirements of the underlying zone, the current zoning is staying in place. So there are protections for the residential areas. Minimum of 5% of the lot shall be reserved for open space. Site plan review, as mentioned before, the planning board shall conduct site plan review, and they can do that if they have the special permit on some of the uses. They can do special permit and site plan review at the same time. And this is also new. For site plan review in the Mill District, they will forward the site plan to the Saugus Historical Commission for their review and comment. I don't think this happens now in any of our zoning districts, so the Historical Commission gets to play an important role in the preservation of this mill district here. A lot of these uses will be allowed by special permit. A lot of people are wondering, well, what are the criteria that either the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board are going to use when they evaluate whether or not they should grant a special permit? Well, these are the criteria that both boards will have to use when they evaluate whether or not to grant a special permit. Adequacy of the site for the size of the proposed project, suitability of the site for the proposed uses, degree to which the proposed project complies with the purposes of the Mills mixed-use overlay, extent to which the project contributes to the historic context of the overlay district, extent to which the affordable housing is a component of the project, public access on a trail connectivity to lands along the Saugus River, if applicable, impact on traffic and pedestrian flow, safety and access for emergency vehicles, the extent to which the project promotes sustainable building and site design. So those are all the criteria that will be used, that have to be used by both boards when they are considering granting a special permit. Another novelty under this overlay is we are proposing a pre-application meeting. Town manager will call in the developer, the appropriate departments, the appropriate boards to sit down and have a discussion about a proposal before it even gets submitted to any of the boards for review under a formal process. So there will get to be a lot of interaction. Developers will get to hear exactly what the town means by the overlay district, what they're looking for from the developer, and the developer will have a chance to interact with department heads and boards before we actually go through a formal process of a hearing either before the selectmen or the planning board. So that is excellent. That is really forward-looking and really progressive zoning. We also deal with parking. We have the sizes of parking spaces. We're encouraging compact spaces, 35%, bicycle parking, minimum maximum parking requirements, and shared parking. Let me just go back over that minimum and maximum parking requirements for a second. Basically, planning today is looking at more sustainable development. How do we really look at development that will stay for a long time, that will have a mixture of uses, will accommodate a number of uses, and that will protect the environment? A lot of times, believe it or not, developers want to create more parking than necessary. And that creates a lot of problems. Environmentally, you have more runoff issues, drainage issues. And how many times have we driven by parking lots and see large expanses of parking areas that are never used except maybe at Christmas time? So we want to set standards that say, this is the minimum number of spaces you have to have, and this is the maximum amount you have to have. You can't have any more than this maximum amount. Now, if they feel they need more than the maximum amount, they can also go to the Board of Appeals and request relief to exceed the maximum amount required. But planning today is really looking at, trying to really look at creating what they think is absolutely necessary without creating excesses. And this area of the Mill District is on a transit line, it's on a bus line, and hopefully if there's any residential that go in there, some of the people will take the buses. There won't be a greater need for automobile. But each project will be evaluated based on what the developer's proposal is and what he feels are the parking requirements. It gives us some flexibility, though, in the parking, and that's the key, what I'm trying to say here, as well as shared parking. Obviously, if there's offices and at night there are restaurant uses, when the offices vacate after 5 o'clock, restaurants could use some of the parking set aside for the office use. So it makes sense to use shared parking to discourage vast areas of parking areas. The design criteria that we have in the zoning proposal, it promotes quality development that is compatible with the character of the historic mills and pedestrian scale projects. Compatible design enhances the quality of life for all residents while strengthening the economic viability of the overall district. So we really are setting up some general criteria that gives guidance to developers on how to restore their existing properties and any new development, how to respect the historic. Planning board can also create specific design guidelines based on the criteria, and I would be happy to work with the planning board on that as if this gets adopted and create detailed design guidelines that developers would have to follow. But at least under this here now, they at least have the criteria that they have to follow. We also have signage in this proposal. We're encouraging a mixed type of signage, awnings with signs on them, projecting signs, wall signs, but most importantly, we're encouraging signs that are scaled to the building, that fit into the appropriate architecture of the building, and we're encouraging materials that respect the historical character of the buildings. So we're encouraging wood signs, metal signs. We're discouraging any type of plastic signs. We're encouraging and only allowing externally lit signs. So we don't want any signs. How many times we see signs on buildings, plastic signs lit from internally? looks a little bit tacky, we think, in the historic district. So we're really encouraging externally lit signs and materials of signs. So think Melrose Center, quaint downtown with awnings, with signs on the awnings, with projecting signs that might be projecting wooden signs with gold leaf on them, that type of thing. So that's what we're looking for in this district. So again, signage will be reviewed by the planning board. It will come under site plan review. It will also go over to the historical commission, which will give their input and their recommendations to the planning board before the planning board takes any actions on it. So these are just the type of signs we allow, window signs, awning signs, etc. That's my presentation. I hope I went fast enough for everybody. Everyone, I know it's late, but be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Moderator, or anyone who wants to speak on it.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Mr. Long.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, do we have any proposals for this particular location right now? Then at what point in time should people, whoever the property owners are, if they have, say, currently a piece of property that's industrial zone, and they want to go forward with this if we adopt it, at what point in time do they pass the point where they can't go back to their own zone, their old zoning?
A developer can opt into the overlay, or an owner of the property can opt into the overlay district at any period of time. There's no deadline on it. So one would assume that if an owner was developing a plan to redevelop let's say it's a mill building, then at the point when he feels that he has a credible proposal, then he could express his interest to the building department that he would opt in, he would like to opt into the overlay district. In that period of time then, at that point in time, he would have to follow the requirements of the overlay district. If it's a mill building and the owner wants to, say, keep his an existing business in that mill building and go forward with some other mixed uses that are allowed in the overlay district, then he could do that. Just the existing business, say it was a manufacturer of woolen, we'll say, that would be grandfathered in, and that use could stay there as he developed his new uses under the overlay district. But that non-conforming use would just be that. It would be non-conforming use, it would be grandfathered in, it would be allowed to stay there until that business went out. But the owner of a property would opt in, I'm assuming, when he has a development ready. Now, once he opts into the overlay district, can he go back out of the district? Is that one of your questions as well?
What triggers?
His action triggers it. His request to be put in the overlay district triggers it.
Just a request to a building inspector?
Right, because then the building, because he has at that point, I'm assuming he has a development. Say he's got a development, he wants to develop 2 floors of office and 2 floors of residential. He'll go to the building department and say, Mr. Brony, I'd like to go into the overlay district. And so then Fred would review the zoning under the overlay district and say you have to go to the planning board for approval or the board of selectmen. But at that point, it's the point when the developer feels or the owner feels that he has a development that he wants to opt into the district. It's that point. So there's no timeline, he doesn't have to opt in, there's no pressure to opt in 6 months or 6 years. As long as the overlay district is there, he can go into it when he has a proposal. If he doesn't have a proposal, I don't see why he would opt into it. He would just stay, and the uses that are in there now would stay there. The only reason he would go into it if he had a development or he sells it to someone who wants to develop it for those uses that are allowed in the overlay district.
Now, my point is this: there should be an official entry point. In other words, should it be a proposal, or should it be a submission of a site plan to the planning board, or something going to the selectmen, not a conversation with the building inspector or whoever. It should be something very definitive that says, yes, I'm entering into this proposal.
Well,
Otherwise, we're going to have all kinds of suits if this becomes a popular situation.
No, Mr. Warren, that's how it works now. The building inspector is the enforcer of the zoning. When someone comes into the town to want to do something, they go to the building inspector, and the building inspector interprets the zoning. That's the way it works. The building inspector says, okay, you're in the R1 zone, these are your requirements, you have to do this and you have to do that. Someone comes into the building inspector and says, I want to do this in the Mill Overlay District, and the building inspector will make the interpretation, okay, you're going to go into the Overlay District, these are your requirements, and this is what you have to do. The building inspector, under the code in Saugus, interprets the zoning. That is the first stop on anyone that wants to do anything in the town of Saugus relative to land use. Go to the building inspector, and then the developer would say, I want to opt into it. So Mr. Baroni knows then he has to look at the proposal based on the overlay district, and then the requirements are right there, what has to happen.
I think we have a major disagreement on this. It's not the opinion of the building inspector what can be built on a piece of land, because the land would have its designation already there. You can easily look up in the zoning bylaw book what the uses are for that particular zoning as it stands right now. It would seem to me that we would need something on a much more official level to avoid any conflict and any misunderstanding. Actually, you're kind of making my point with this situation here. If we don't have a proposal, by the way, let me clear something up. One of the property owners over there, the property identified with the smokestack, is my son-in-law's uncle. So he has no financial interest. I wished he did, but he doesn't. I wouldn't be speaking, but he'd be okay. But there's no financial interest by my son-in-law. So just so everybody be aware of that. Well, what I'm saying, and by the way, second question is, are these property owners in agreement with that? Because, again, going to a conversation, and you're aware of this because I talked with you about it, have these property owners opted into this idea of this type of overlay?
Yes. And thank you for that. We had that good conversation the other day. Appreciate that. Yes, all the property owners have been talked to, and we've had numerous meetings down there. But in particular, I did outreach to Mr. Cipriano's son, the late Mr. Cipriano's son. He did come to my office the other day, and we did have a conversation. And I can say, without hesitating, that he is in support of this project. He really didn't know too much about it when his dad was alive, but he is in support of it, and the other mill owners are in support of it as well. So there is no issue with any of the mill owners relative to this development. This overlay district, they certainly embrace it.
I won't keep beating this thing, but I talked to Mr. Cipriano around 6:30 tonight, and he had told me he had had a conversation with you, a visit from one of our town meeting members, and a call from a town meeting member from Florida in support of this. At that point in time, though, he was still not sure as what this all meant to him and to his family. and was going to consider having an attorney look into the situation. But that's regardless. What my point was, not just this particular person, but are all the property owners in there along that strip that's shown on the map, are they in agreement with it? I mean, have they signed off in some fashion? They're saying, yes, we don't mind if you do this.
I don't know if, well, I'll just go over this right now. I can say that this has been one of the most extensive outreach efforts that probably the town has undertaken in a long time relative to zoning. And I know another town meeting member is going to come up and talk about this, but since it's here right now, there have been, and I'll just go over them right now, and I think they were handed out, but there have been meetings since November 26, 2012, in which it was a working committee meeting. And by working committee people, there was a committee established, and they outreached to the residents in that overlay district and the surrounding area. In November 26, there was a working committee meeting. In December 13th of 2012, there was a meeting with the property owners. In March 21st of 2013, another working committee meeting. April 3rd, 2013, another working committee meeting. April 10th, another working committee. April 18th, a presentation to the planning board. April 24th of 2013, a working committee meeting. May 8th, 2013, a community public forum. May 24th, 2013, a working committee meeting. I came on board June 3rd, 2013, and on June 5th, we had a community public forum follow-up meeting in which I attended, in which I personally saw property owners there and residents there. Another community working committee meeting on June 26, 2013. Another one on July 23rd. A planning board presentation on October 3rd. A presentation to the Saugus Economic Development Committee on October 28th. A presentation to the Historical Commission on November 21st. And finally, the Planning Board public hearing on the zoning on January 16, 2014. So, my God, I don't know how much more outreach we could have done under this, and I don't hear any opposition from anyone.
Well, one of the mill owners couldn't make that the hearing on the zoning article at the planning board because his wake was being held that night, as you know, and he was being buried the next day. And when I asked his family members at that point in time, this was less than 2 weeks ago, if they were aware of this, they weren't aware of it. They weren't aware of any of it. The gentleman that passed away was 98 years old and was stricken with cancer in the last 4 months and went downhill very rapidly. But apparently he was quite, was quite lucid and of mind and everything, but when he started to slip, it went fast. But the family was never really involved in it. But here's what my concern is. If I understand this properly, should we pass this overlay, we, the town meeting members, have now separated ourselves from something that's really one of our duties, and that's zoning. That's looking at a proposal. That's having the planning board have a hearing, and for the opportunity for us to go. And then when they come here, such as this, having a hearing at this point in time. This is a public hearing for this article. Should this overlay be passed, and should people in that district opt to go that route, we, the town meeting members, have given up our right to be involved in any zoning changes. Now, as I say, as town meeting members, that's one of our functions, is to vote on zoning. 50 members here, we affect the greatest representative body in this town. So it seems that I don't think I really want to go and oppose the charter. I noticed earlier, no disrespect to the manager, But that gave a very clear indication as to what the route would be. Should we pass this? Should we take ourselves out of the game, so to speak? You go to the manager with your proposals. You go with his department heads. All along that route that you saw on that map are also, those are R1 zones over there too. And not only that, but I mean, are we looking at something what the future of Saugus is going to be in certain other areas of this town? I think it's imperative that this body here remain involved. We are residents. We need to actually be the final people, the people have the final say in this. And I don't know how we can do it if we give up that right to special permitting process at the planning board or the board of selectmen. So thank you. Oh, by the way, if this was adopted in a different manner by the town meeting, much as what we have up in, say Avalon Bay, Stevens Pond. As you know, up there, they were able to use a clustered zoning concept. If we had something like that, if this was something like that being added to the book, the people up at Stevens Pond, or that built the housing up there and used that clustered zoning, had to come to this body to have its zoning changed, because it was industrial up there behind the shopping mall. So we were still into it. We had a chance to see what it was going to look like. One of the people who has since passed rather tragically was heavily involved in that situation. And actually, knowing that they had to come to town meeting, it actually made a better proposal, I think, where the units went from 576 down to 323. But as I say, if we take ourselves out of it, you'll get what you get. And we won't have anything really to say about it unless you want to go to a meeting and sit there as a member of the audience. I don't think that's what we get elected for. Thank you.
Further discussion on Article 9? Yes.
Mr. Moderator, fellow town meeting members, I have been to 2 of these meetings. This is the 3rd one. And I have the same complaints, and I know you're not happy to hear them, but in looking this over, if you take a look at the request and what they have written, it's a lesson in using figures and numbers to make them come out what you want them to come out with. First of all, I don't believe in this area there are 35% of subcompact cars in relation to the rest of the vehicles. You don't have 2 parking spaces for a 2-bedroom, you have 1.5. I find it difficult to park a half a car. Maybe I only can park it for 4 hours instead of 8. If you take a look at this area, and if you have been down there when a trailer truck comes in and makes a delivery, you will find that the cab of the trailer truck is parked right on Central Street because there isn't any room. I believe the concept is a wonderful concept, and I know they have worked hard. And I can give them great pride and good job done, man, and working hard and working for the community, and that's what we're here for. But also, in the usage, in the verbiage, they can use it commercially for a restaurant. they can have doctor's office, and then they can have the word that really bugs me, drugs. And that's all the word is in the bylaw. It says drugs. Now, we can assume, very bad word, we can assume that what they mean by that is a pharmacy. That may or may not be. But if someone were to contest that and take it to court, the odds are they could put anything related to drugs in there and the courts would hold it up. I have a recommendation that we refer this to the annual town meeting to give the committee an opportunity to revisit and look over these bylaws. And even though it's in the old bylaws, that doesn't make it right. I do not accept, will not accept, and will not vote for anything that has the word drugs in there. Just the word drugs. Now, our illustrious town council's opinion may or may not be that that's okay, Gene. It's okay. Because it's old and that's what we use, the same old bylaws. In all due respect to our town council and to any attorney, their opinion is just that. It's an opinion. And if it ever goes to court, the court has the final say. So I have a motion that we refer this to the annual town meeting and give the committee an opportunity to make any changes that they have to make it more feasible. Maybe all we want to do is change the bylaws and just change the zoning and let it go at that. The concept looks good, but if you know the mill area, to have a walkway, to have a restaurant, to have people living there, residents, there isn't any parking. Something has to be done. Thank you.
If I could, just on clarification on your motion, there are kind of two options. We can postpone this until the annual town meeting, but what that does is put it off until the town meeting with no further investigation or nothing. In other words, it's not going back to anyone. Or we can refer it to a committee or back to the maker or back to someone to look into something further and then come back to us. I don't know how you want to.
Refer it back to the people that made the presentation and let them make changes if they can. If that's acceptable.
So what your motion would be is to refer it back to the maker?
Yep.
Which in this case, if I can find it here, is the town manager, I believe, is the sponsor of the motion. So the motion would be to refer it back to the town manager. And we have a second on that. Do we have any discussion on the motion to refer? Mr. Manager.
Just to briefly speak on the article, so that we can sort of take a 30,000-foot look at this. This is part of being able to have a vision, to be able to see what we want to craft or what we want to create. What's been described here, and it's just a difference of approach, is a reactive approach where somebody comes with a proposal and sort of vetted and whatnot, and goes through a process that I think we all know, not an easy process, which is good and bad. I think part of what this article and what we're attempting to do is to take an approach to have something there that actually could be marketed to say this is what we would want to attract this type of use in these areas, because right now it's industrial, so any light manufacturing can go in there. And I don't think the neighbors or people, you know, we're trying to move out of that perspective in that type of development. And I guess I would equate to this is this is the first overlay that we've probably that I'm aware of in the history that we've put together. But if you look at, if we had this type of vision and town meeting had this insight, as well as you know, with the planning board and the community as a whole, if we put something in place even 10 years ago, never mind 20 or 30 years, down at where we have the riverfront down on Ballard Street, we wouldn't have what we have down there now. We've lost a restaurant that's on the water because there's been no forward thinking or progressive thinking or trying to have a vision and trying to craft a zoning that would allow that to take place. And I would suggest this, is that we are moving, that's why we hired an economic development planner. We have casinos coming in. The town meeting supported to bring on an economic development planner. And part of what we're doing an overlay. We're going to be coming in the annual for the medical marijuana dispensaries. That's the same thing of designating areas that for zoning, that those places could be located, and that property would be used for those purposes, as well as we're looking at Route 1. And this is a Delta grant that we've applied for that we believe we're going to receive from MAPC, which also worked on this for the technical assistance. We need to have the foresight to be able to take advantage of development, whether it's, you know, in the development that we can control and zone, so that we're able to bring in healthy development on Route 1 rather than a reactive development. In other words, if we have an opportunity for, say, the Hilltop property, to partner with them and to be able to put together a zoning overlay that will actually enhance the value and to be able to attract something that we want for use that would be beneficial to us, rather than, say, come up with a developer and then they now submit a plan and they go through the process and it's whatever they want to use it for, rather than something that's going to attract. That's what we're trying to do so that we can sustain our levy, because if you have to look what's going to happen in 20 years, 30 years, we need to be able to sustain healthy growth with commercial property. And I would suggest that we haven't done a good job of that over the years. Not anyone's fault, but we've never had plans. That's what planning and an overlay and having zoning to be able to go out and say, this is what we've zoned on Route 1 so that it's feasible for, you know, a hotel or a certain type of the office building. Now you're able to go out and take that after you've passed that, whether it's the Mill District or the riverfront down on Ballard Street or Route 1, and you're able to go out and market that to companies or businesses or what it is that we've had the vision to try to attract, and say, come here, we're here, we're set up, ready to go, and this is something that's welcomed here, rather than an adverse process and people trying to get in with different proposals. So I guess looking at it from that perspective, that's what we're moving towards, is now looking at Route 1 and trying to do a cluster envelope type of zoning, you know, that would be presented and brought towards to town meeting. So I just want to think, and I would urge you to support this as the town and the economic development moves forward to be able to have sustainable tax and commercial tax base. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Manoogian.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, I was just wondering, Robert, if we can bring back that, the map. Okay. There we go. Thank you. First, I want to thank my colleague from Precinct 9 for raising those issues, and my friend from Precinct 8 for bringing up the drug issue. Certainly, our zoning bylaw in total could use revamping. The entire zoning bylaw, which goes back to 1977. In fact, a town meeting in I think 1988. I think my colleague from Precinct 9 will remember when we served on the Board of Selectmen, we recommended a master plan be developed for the town. And at that time in 1988, you talk about the cost of a capital plan, that was $90,000 back then. And in 1991, another 15 was added, only to have a town meeting refer it to the shelf for guidance. And this particular process, as Mr. Luongo points out, began in 2004 with a $30,000 grant that came to the town from the MAPC. And I have the major report and a summary here. It's called the Saugus Community Development Plan. And within that document were a number of recommendations, including for this area, the Saugus River. And it said, well, the historic mill and the Saugus River, making suggestions that there be an overlay, and it specifically mentioned as such, that as a way to preserve that. There were a number of suggestions, but in particular, our former colleague, Janet Lucy, took this document seriously and put forth a number of initiatives that this town meeting adopted, including inclusionary zoning, including the Affordable Housing Trust, and other things that, when you look at the document, we have done. Some things we haven't. We had a former town meeting member for Precinct 3 that talked about a river walk, and town meeting appropriated money for that, only to take it back later on. So the time isn't in the future. The time is now for this town to think differently. You know, Chapter 41, Section 81D requires that, I'll read it, a planning board, and thank you for letting me use the iPad. It's so much easier than having to type. A planning board established in any city or town under Section 81 shall, not may, not hopefully, shall make a master plan of such city or town or such part or parts thereof as said board may deem advisable. We don't have that. We don't have a planning board that's come before us and said, we need money so that we can do this. I don't think that's been proposed in any budgets, past or upcoming. But I did see a very enthusiastic planning board when they had their hearing, where members said it's about time. And there was animation in their comments and excitement. Likewise with our Historic Commission, also that pushed to have the opportunity to save this. You know, we came to this impasse that's been described, that hopefully isn't an impasse, at the first Community Public Forum on May 8th, 2013, when neighbors were asking pointed questions. And it was at that moment that, you know, I was sort of the MC of the whole evening. I said to them, okay, let us know now. If you don't feel these mills are worth preserving, say so, and we will go away. And it was quiet in the room, in this room. And people said, no, they are worth it. And a former colleague from Precinct 7, Nick Nicosia, he came forward and he said, yes, you know, maybe, at first I thought it was too late. He said they are worth preserving. The issue is, do you want to react like you did? Not you, many of you weren't here. But when MAPC came out, we don't even have an updated zoning map in this town. We had to remind them of what town meeting did. See that yellow parcel right there? If that isn't spot zoning, I don't know what is. That's an example of the tail wagging the town meeting dog. So yes, I will say to my colleague from Precinct 9, I don't want to separate myself from our duty, but my duty, I see my duty as looking to the future and not reacting to what's coming before me because somebody wants to put in condos in I-2 zone or an I-1 zone, something this town meeting has never denied. Denver Street, Winston Street, Alco Foods, across from Spuds. We've never denied anyone a down zone. So under your approach, they could bring in the wrecking ball, the bulldozers, and raise the whole thing and come to town meeting and say, we're going to put in a condo development from one end to the other. And town meeting would most likely grant it because it's a down zone. All right? On top of it all, the showstopper for me on this, and I see the two property owners are in the back, is this parcel here. And this is zoned I-2, and it's mostly on the other side of the river. And MAPC felt that we couldn't ask, but we did, and the property owners agreed that if they go into the overlay, which, by the way, the triggers would be submitting plans, a letter of intent, and doing something that they do in other communities. They have pre-application meetings, whether it be with a mayor or a town manager or boards of selectmen. Change that if you want. But we're so used to doing things a certain way in Saugus, of reacting rather than looking ahead. Mr. Moderator, for me, your indulgence. Tonight, we have an opportunity to preserve, to enhance, and to make history with one single action. Not only to save the mills, but to enhance an area, to enhance property values, and to do something we've never done before, look out to the future. We could preserve history by providing property owners with an option that will cause them to recognize the benefits of preserving the appearance of their buildings. And yes, I will say to my colleague, I did go to Mr. Cipriano, only because that morning you had gone to this gentleman and say he didn't know. And I didn't want anyone to come up here and say, there's a property owner there that doesn't know. So Mr. Luongo was gracious enough to meet with him, and they scheduled an appointment, and he met with the gentleman. And when I did visit him, he had the file from his father, who had been going to all the meetings. He was at all the meetings. He did know, and it was my understanding that the meeting took place only as a result of the potentiality of an argument that somebody didn't know at the last minute. That's what you do when you're a town meeting member and you anticipate what the arguments are going to be, like I just heard. We can enhance the meaning of Saugus history when we continue the theme established at our Treasured Ironworks, and we proceed north on Central Street and see a thematic representation of 19th century Saugus, one that will be preserved, with access to the Saugus River, arrived at with alternative forms of transportation that are being encouraged with the language that Mr. Luongo added right after he arrived, with local access to goods and services and public transportation. We can make history by recognizing what scores of Massachusetts communities have done consistently for decades, having a say in what we want our town to look like now and in the future. For others, it's a habit to have proactive zoning initiatives. For Saugus, it has been uncommon, but need not be. You know, many people have commented on Market Square in Linfield. Why can't we have that in Saugus? It's the type of arguments that you're hearing here tonight are the reason why we don't have that in Saugus. It's wholly appropriate. Excuse me. It really is okay for the dog of town meeting, we're the dog, to wag the tail of zoning and set that standard. And as my colleague points out, that we bind ourselves to our duty. We envelop ourselves with the duty to look ahead, rather than wait for the initiative of a developer who wants to ride the wave of the condo market and we rezone, spot zone, in the middle of nowhere. It's wholly appropriate that we legitimatize what has taken place already in Cliftondale Square, Saugus Center, and throughout many of our older neighborhoods, that being mixed-use zoning, where a residence is joined to a business. By specifying in our zoning that we are able to take advantage of our inclusionary zoning bylaw, which requires a set-aside for affordable units, which was another part of this 2004 proposal, if you're against doing that, then please explain that to the people of Central Street, where they got a 40B, where Eustace Street, where they got a 40B 2-3 times renewed, and the end of Indian Valley, where there's a 40B. We're not at our 10%. This, and proposals like it, are the way to get there. Unless you want to appropriate money to build affordable units, I don't think you do. We are also making history the first time our zoning will acknowledge the importance of the Saugus River. Think of that. There's nothing in your zoning now that talks about the Saugus River. But it is, that river, much about who we are as a community and our identity. And yes, I would agree with that 2004 Community Development Plan that suggests further amendments to the Wetland Control Bylaw be employed. And I should note that the Saugus River Watershed Council, Joan LeBlanc, was intimately involved in this last summer, and her suggestions have been woven into here, along with the dozens of suggestions of neighbors that we actually responded to and put the responses on the web. Did the working group include a member from Precinct 7? Well, up until that time, we hadn't, but of course, Hull Drive is split in half, and as my colleague from Precinct 7 will know, every town meeting member from Precinct 7 came on board, including the town meeting members from Precinct 1. So that was a great suggestion, and they participated, and our last meeting was at the library, and it was decided to go forward. We are making history by establishing an important role for our historical commission. Do they really exist just to take pictures of buildings before they're demolished so they can go into some file somewhere? Or do we want them, guys like Steve Rich, Steve Carlson, persons good enough to be persons of the year? They're certainly good enough to review, with their expertise, the appearance of these buildings and make sure that there is a theme in place consistent with the will of town meeting. So I would urge you to be in touch with your duty to look for the best interests of this community going forward. You're not giving up your right to anything. It's the developers or the project owners or the property owners who will choose to give up something. Traffic, they could put a strip mall here right now as a matter of right. Look at this property right here. There's homes that are there. There used to be a variety store and Ronnie's Radio Repair. Do you remember Ronnie's Radio Repair? We could open up it again, put it there again if he wanted. Nothing to stop it. What we didn't do is we didn't tamper with setbacks and side yards, as was recommended by the MAPC. We didn't allow additional height, as was recommended by the MAPC. We did our diligence in protecting that surrounding area. And I only wish that the people who have concerns now came forward at one of those 16 meetings at that time and shared the concerns that they had. If you refer this back, the message is clear. You're not interested in doing this type of overlay. And yes, there will be more. We're looking at one on February 3rd for the waterfront. You want to revitalize Cliftondale Square? Read the report on how to do it. Unless you're willing to spend $150,000 to change the entire zoning map and the entire zoning bylaw, the only way that you can get to yes being economic development, branding of the community, how we appear to others, it's not just the financial thing. It's what we do with our land and how we regard and treat our resources. I would urge you, this should be a slam dunk. You won't find any zoning proposal that's been as vetted and thoroughly aired as this. I hope you support it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Mnuchin. 1 second. Mr. Rossetti, please.
Moderator, town meeting members, home audience, I promised to be good. I told that to Mr. Luongo at the other meeting. There are some things that are really good with this plan. The preservation of the historic mills is a great thing. That's a really, really good thing, but unless you pass this, that doesn't happen, or it doesn't have to happen, okay? And that means that the people who own those properties have to opt into this. And for them to opt into it, there has to be an economic incentive. So if that incentive doesn't present itself, there's no reason for anyone to opt into this plan. Okay, some of the things that were said were perfectly true. The town does not have accurate zoning maps. If you ask Mr. Luongo, if you ask the building inspector, it's really difficult trying to figure out what a piece of property in this town is zoned as, okay? The maps are insufficient. Trying to share them between departments is very difficult. The manager has a great plan, which hopefully will come to fruition. I don't think it's quite 150, as Mr. Manoogian suggested, or my colleague from Precinct 10. However, it is something expensive. The plan would incorporate a computerized system that would allow maps to be shared between departments, which would make life a whole lot easier, because when you get a plan that comes before the Planning Board or Board of Appeals or any of the boards, you ask for recommendations from different departments, Fire Department, Police Department, DPW. Sometimes they're doing it by paper, sometimes they get them, sometimes they don't. So if there was a town-wide system, a computer system that could handle it, that would solve a lot of problems. The zoning laws, we have had discussions with, some of you may remember her, Jean Johnson-Delios. She's in either Reading or North Reading, and they're doing a total revamp of their zoning laws. And I believe the price tag on that is about $100,000. But anyways, moving on to this proposal. It's come before the Planning Board on several occasions, and I sat on those hearings. I sat on the most recent one. The most recent hearing, there were 5 members seated. The vote was 4-0 to 1. I voted present because I had some questions about this. Like I said, let's go over the positive things first, because that's the easiest, and there's some really good ideas here. I don't want to denigrate those in the least. The idea of using combined pre-meetings with developers is a great idea. Someone has a thought, they come into town, you set up a meeting with different boards, different people in town, they get a chance to run it by you and say, here's what we're thinking, what do you think? Before they start spending a lot of money on architects, and no offense to the architects in the audience, but before they start spending a lot of money on these plans, they find out what the reception is. Is it good, is it bad? Okay, that's a great idea. That's what Mayor Torigian did in Peabody, and that's why Peabody has industrial parks and has a lot of things, because they took their planning board, their Board of Appeals, their, all the other boards in town, stuck them on a bus and sent them out to visit people who could come in and build things. So, great idea. Okay, some of the other things that was good, the concept of shared parking, it's not a bad idea at all, and we're looking at it in Cliftondale. And I have to give you a fair warning that when the overlay for Cliftondale comes in and when the overlay for Route 1 comes in, I may be talking exactly on the opposite side of this issue, okay? But I will be back speaking on those, and I can promise you that those are coming. There are going to be more overlays. It will be Cliftondale, it will be Route 1 in at least 1 or 2 forms, maybe more. Now, the biggest thing that concerns me, well, several things. One of them, this falls on the Planning Board, and I don't shirk the responsibility of doing that. Right now, I'm chair of the Planning Board. That's for the next year. That could change, entirely possible. This is all dependent upon the Planning Board. The Planning Board, in some cases, is superseding Board of Selectmen, is superseding Board of Appeals, is superseding Historic Commission. I'm not sure that's a good way of doing it, okay? The other thing that really concerns me with this is we're going to pass something now which people may or may not opt into, but that's beside the point. But down the road, when someone comes in for a development, it's going to be up to the planning board to decide what's right for the neighbors. And again, I'm not trying to shirk the responsibilities on this, but there's a lot of issues that have to be explored. There's the traffic issues in that area, and granted, maybe their traffic issue is no worse than Cliftondale Square or Ballard Street or any of the other streets in town. But when it comes before any of the boards, it's going to be a much more difficult issue. The river in that area has problems, okay? Not to get into Elm Street and the bridge and all of that, but the neighbors in that area have problems with the water. And granted, there's provisions in this that say a developer is restricted by the Wetlands Act and certain other River Act, so they're going to have to do things. The other thing that really wasn't addressed, I don't think anyways, is the housing issue. What you're going to stick in there for housing, granted 40Bs supersede anything. So as of right now, if someone wanted to, and they could convince the owners of those buildings, they could buy the buildings, knock them down, and put in a 40B. And could the town stop it? Probably not. I've sat through 4 of those hearings on the Board of Appeals. We didn't have much luck. We could modify things. Caddy Farm, we modified. We cut down the size of it by 25%, but still going on. The ones on Central Street, the one in Indian Valley, those went through. We were able to reduce them slightly, but that's all you can do. You can't keep them out. I don't think the housing component has really been looked at. And again, that gets back to the economic incentive. If someone had one of those buildings and wanted to turn it into housing, the buildings, all right, you have 4 or 5 floors. You're going to take the top 2 or 3 and turn them into housing. The marketability of those, if you could put in, I don't know, half a dozen units, okay? And let's just play with numbers. Let's say it cost you something, pick a number, $50,000, $100,000 to renovate each unit so it's housing. Granted, they're on a bus line. What are you going to be able to sell those for? You know, there's going to be a machine shop in 100 feet away. There may be a restaurant right downstairs. Granted, some people like those things. But again, unless the owner of the building opts into this with an economic incentive, it's not going to happen. Now, the smokestack that's featured in all of the pictures, that has cell antennas on it. They get a pretty decent rent from those cell antennas. Taking the smokestack down is probably not going to happen, okay? Okay, just a couple of other things. The use of alternate transportation, bicycles, for example, that's a great thing to promote. We have people who do ride bikes around town. Incidentally, it's called bike racking. I was corrected on that at our meeting. So that's good. The use of smaller cars. The use of shared parking, it's going to have some problems, but it can happen. The mini parking, I think you're going to wind up with SUVs parked in small spaces, but it can happen, okay? I talked about the maps. Okay, the preservation. The master plan. There is a move afoot in the town. The town manager is working on this very diligently to try and come up with a master plan for the town. We've talked about doing it at the planning board level. We're waiting to see how it's going to happen with the rest of the town, but it's being worked on. Again, the concerns I have, the plan isn't a bad plan, but I think it's got some faults in it. And one of the biggest faults that concerns me is the neighborhood impact. I'm just concerned about that. I'd like to see some more work done on that before it goes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Mr. Long.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Moderator, I know it's getting late. I felt duty-bound to respond to the being labeled as a reactionary here on issues that I raised tonight. I think those were very valid issues, particularly when it comes down to giving away the rights of the town meeting members and passing them on to the planning board or the board of selectmen, as far as zoning is concerned. Not looking to the future? Who the hell are you to tell me I'm not looking to the future? I've been on the planning board. I did 5 years over there. I think I know what's happening around this town, just as much as you do, sir. As far as asking our town planner here, Mr. Luongo, to sit, had you talked with one of the owners of it? I'm at a wake. I'm talking to the future owner of the place, and he doesn't know really what's going on. So I stopped by Town Hall and give him a heads up, really, because he in turn told me he was going to call you.
Mr. Long, could I ask you to address your comments to the body as opposed to a one-on-one debate?
I'm not used to being here. That's kind of fun. But as I said, giving up the rights is really what you're talking about doing here. Proposals that come to the town meeting won't come to the town meeting. And to say that we're giving up nothing, that's not true at all. If the rezoning doesn't come here, you gave it up. And you gave it up to the planning board, and you gave it up to the board of, the Board of Appeals, and you gave it up to the selectmen. And it's not going to stop 40Bs. As the previous speaker said, 40Bs will come in anytime they want to, anywhere they want to. We're not protecting anything of that nature here. Do I think there's some goodness to this? Absolutely. I think our town meeting member that suggested that this be referred was an excellent idea coming out in the springtime. I would certainly support this as a special zoning designation. In fact, I think that Lozano-White study that was done back in 1988-89, which I believe I have a copy of at the house, that was actually saying that we should have some sort of a mixed use in Saugus Center and Cliftondale Square. That would give us some more affordable housing. And I think we should roll something like that into this. You say you don't want to wait. Okay, so let's put the time and the effort into the next couple of months and get something done. Something that we can agree to here. And not give up our rights to do something as elected town meeting members. Thank you.
Further discussion, yes.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say first off, I support this. And when I say I support this, I don't mean me. I represent people in my precinct. And everyone I talk to in my precinct, they not only supported this, they were excited about it. I live in Precinct 7. They said, gee, this would be nice. It'd be something like up in Amesbury where they have the mills. It'd be nice to see something. Linfield has a nice little project. You know, it won't be on the scale of that. And as far as giving away our right, we're not giving away our right. We're exercising it here tonight. And what we're doing is we're voting for an overlay zone. And what that does, it gives the person that owns the property the permission to downgrade their own zoning. Right now, we can have a gas station, I believe. Is that right, Mr. Longo? We can have a gas station there. Do you think the people on Seville Street want a gas station? It just so happens that's the zoning that was inherited. This gives us an opportunity to erase that, to make it so that we might have housing. And believe me, any affordable housing we get is one step closer to eliminating the threat of a 40B. I know we keep creeping up on it, and I'll tell you that when a 40B comes in, we don't have any say in the zoning. No one has any say in the zoning. So anything we can do to increase affordable housing, we should do it. And this project, as a previous speaker mentioned, was fought for by our former dear departed town meeting member. And she also was a champion of affordable housing. And I think she saw that vision. And I think we should wholeheartedly support this. You know, a previous speaker said we should go with the status quo. If they want to change the zoning, there's 18 properties there. I don't know what they are, R4, mixture of different things. We've got mills, 3 mills property. Now, that would mean the status quo, would have 21 hearings at the planning board, and they would go on, there isn't just one hearing, there's several hearings. It would end up to be like 100 hearings at the planning board, because there's like 2 or 3 hearings usually. And then it would come to us. If they recommended it, if someone wanted to go from an I-2 down to an R4, they would come to us, and we would vote on that parcel. Tonight, we would be doing that. We would say, yeah, you can take that I-2 and make it an R4 or make it a mixed use. And mixed use, to me, is a true blessing. It gives people, a person who might want to start a little business, they could have apartments above, they could live there. To me, this is a giant step into the future. And to maintain the status quo is just throwing an anchor in the Saugus River and holding us back. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, right here.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, I rise tonight not only as someone who has been involved in this process from the beginning. I also sit on the Economic Development Committee. This was sought and thoroughly gone through. We reached out to the public. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 1. I have not received any negativity at all. Not one of my constituents have come to me to say this doesn't seem like a great idea. This is a vision. This is something that they can possibly decide to use it or not. It's important to look forward, and I don't want to continue to say the same thing and reiterate everything that the previous speakers have said, but we need to look forward. You know, change sometimes may seem scary, but I think that in this case, I think it's important to, there's a vision here, and we need to look forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cox?
Bob Cox, Precinct 4. First, thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, and viewers, for giving me this opportunity. I've got so many things put on my notepad in my back pocket that I couldn't take it out. First of all, I want to say this is probably the most proactive piece of legislation I've seen put before this meeting since I've been following Saugus government. The reason is that what we're doing is we're looking at a piece of property and saying, what would you like to have there as a town? Then we're going to incorporate that into the overlay so that a developer coming in knows the town wants this type of development there. If the developer came in and asked for whatever you want and tore down the building, would lose the historic aspect, then are you telling me that this town meeting would not go from industrial 2, I believe it is, to retail, business 1? They deny them that? No, of course they give it to them. What each of the uses that we're talking about here are basically what we would grant them if they asked individually. But what we're trying to do is continue the harmony of this district. We're saying, developers, we've got land here. You want to come in and work a deal with the owners? Or the owners could put it together, whichever. This is what you're going to be allowed to do. If you come in with something else, well, you can come in with it, but it's not what we want in the area, and you'll probably have a hard time getting it through. And that's just my editorial comment. We're selling this. This is a sales tool, not to the current owners, because, God bless them, they're making money there, and they're employing people, and that's a great thing. But 10 years from now, maybe the market's turn, maybe they don't want to be in that business, they want to retire to Florida. Who knows what the reason is? And the property goes up for sale. Now that is who we are marketing to, the developer who's looking at that property. He's going to come in and say, well, we're going to have to do some historical work, we're going to have to do some infrastructure work, some betterments to the property, having to do with the drainage in the river. And they factor that into their costs. And they sit back and say, this is pretty good. And on a sideline to that, we need housing. We have laws in place that automatically require developers to put aside affordable housing. This is where Janet came from. Here is an opportunity to take land that is very scarce in this town and turn it into housing and business. You can put apartments on top, you can put condos on top, whatever you want to do. It's a mixed use. And you get your affordable housing. I was asked earlier tonight where we are going to develop affordable housing units to make up the 3% we need. This is how we have to do it. We have to be progressive. We have to be thinking ahead. We tell the developers, yes, we want housing here, we want business here, whatever it is, and we create the affordable housing units. That law is already in place, where they have to make a percentage of the units affordable. To criticize the law based upon when does the zoning change? Well, I'm sure there's case law all over the place. When does the transaction occurs? It's usually when a meeting of the minds obtained and maybe a contract, some type of physical activity. It might be when site plan review agrees to the project, or maybe when the deed is transferred. I don't know. That's something that I'm sure is well established in case law. And it's something I'd refer to our town council to assure us that that's the case. We've got an opportunity here to look 10, 15 years into the future and say, this is a really important part of our town. We want to preserve its history, but we want to put it to our best advantage, our best use as a town. And we know that anyone that's interested in looking at it has done his numbers. In most cases, I would assume, they're professional land managers and land developers. And we can say, you know our side. Here, we laid our cards out on the table. That's what we want. We don't want you to come in and put in a gas station, we used as an example. It's not going to get approved. And we're telling them right now, this is what we want for the district. Right now, we're rezoning that district, in essence. It can be grandfathered in its current use. But we're rezoning it right now to allow those uses stated there for future development. Granted, they could be still sold as factories, and there's nothing we can do about that. But there's no harm to it in that it doesn't improve or deteriorate the properties. But we're saying here, we're making that decision to rezone the Mills District right here tonight. This is the authority that's empowered to us by our constituency, the voters that put us in, to make that decision. And we're doing it, and we're doing it in such a way as to entice development into the town. I would love to be able to go around town and say, this area I'd like to have housing, this area I want retail, this area I want small upscale shopping, whatever. We have to live with what we have. We can't do that. So what we do is we have a wish list. And the wish list we have tonight is the Mills Overlay District. Now, there may be a few problems. I don't know. If you want to correct a couple of small problems, do so by amendment. Because I firmly believe that if we do not take action now, this is going to go back on the back burner. We don't want to refer it to the next to the town meeting. I'm sorry, to the annual, because nothing will happen to it. It's going to stay the same. We can't make those little changes. If we refer it back to the town manager who initiated in his committee, commission, whatever, it's going to be a lot of arms in the air. You know, what are we going to have to do to get it through this town meeting? The town meeting is set in its ways. It doesn't want to look forward because everything that's been said against this, at least in my eyes, is saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. We don't want to give up the zoning change in the future because we'd be shirking our duties in the future. No, we're not shirking our duties. We're making the decision now. And this is very important to understand. We're being proactive as a town to bring business in, to improve our tax rolls, to improve the number of affordable housing units in the town, and basically to meet the needs of this town in the environment that we have now and perceive we'll have in the future. There's talk that there's going to be up to a 49% reduction in town aid from the state this year. Now, that's only talk early on in the budget. But reality is, you're not going to turn that number to a plus. The trend is that we're being made self-sufficient. So we have to develop our tax rolls. We have to create administrative properties. We have to stimulate housing, very important. And this is a market where housing is a desperate need. So I really ask you, first, I should add that the Affordable Housing Committee, we talked about this earlier, and it was agreed that this is something we could support. This is something we want to support from the aspect of creating the units to meet our 10%. And as was said by a previous town meeting member, the only way to get rid of 40Bs is to reach 10%. So what we're asking tonight, or what I'm asking tonight, is that you take that small step that is going to create maybe, I don't know how big I'm guessing, anywhere from 5 to maybe 30 units if they go high-rise. I don't know. But it's going to create those houses, those units, that will go towards our 10%, and then we will get rid of the 40Bs. So please, I'm asking you, don't refer it. I would really like our town council to comment about case laws that cover the gaps that we have in this law that was perceived. But reality is, all we're doing is changing the time frame. Instead of having someone come in and say, I want to do this, will you do it with me? And we run all over the place and do what we have, and we end up with things such as the spot zoning. What we're doing now is we're taking the bull by the horns and saying, we must control the development, we must focus where we want things to change and improvements to be made and how it is to be made. And this is the stimulus that we hold in front of the contractors, the developers, the property owners. Again, as I said, we're not necessarily looking towards the owners of the property because this is not a rezoning today. This is a rezoning down the road for the people that are interested in trying to make money off it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Any further discussion on Article 9? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members. I just have a couple of questions for Mr. Luongo. The first one is, through all these meetings you have had with the owners of this property, have you taken any type of a poll or asked them if they plan on opting in or not opting in to this if it passes? And the second question, if it passes, say I owned one of these pieces of land and I didn't opt into the overlay, and I decide to sell this property. If I sell that property, does that automatically go into the overlay, or does it stay opted out of the overlay? Thank you.
Let me answer the second question first. So if you own a property in the overlay district and you sell it, and you don't, if you own it and you don't opt into it and you sell the property, the new owner would be subject to the existing zoning, but then he could opt into the new zoning. So it doesn't prohibit him from opting into it just because you didn't. If you opted into it and then you sold it, then he would be subject to the opt-in because you've opted into that zoning. But there would be no reason for you to opt into it if you didn't have a development to go forward. So there would make no sense. The second question is, none of the property owners said they had a development in mind. Certainly, Mr. Cipriano, at least his son, indicated that he would probably be interested in partnering with someone or selling it. He didn't have the wherewithal to do any development on his own. I think the other property owners would probably evaluate the situation and decide whether or not they wanted to opt in and try to redevelop it, or they would want to partner with someone, or they would want to sell it to someone if the price was right to opt into it. So no one made a commitment that if it's changed, they would exactly develop it. But none of them opposed it. All of them welcomed it. All of them said it gave them a lot of options for the property. All of them recognized it increases the value of their property if they opted into it. It gives more opportunity for them. So there's no opposition. No one came forward and said, I want it because I'm going to do this development. So that wasn't the case, but all of them, I think it goes without saying, welcomed the opportunity to have that option, and it created clearly economic opportunities for them in the future.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm new to town meeting as of this November, but I'm certainly not new to this neighborhood. I grew up, spent most of my life right there on Juliet Road, the horseshoe on the bottom left of the map. I did a lot of times I spent my days riding my bike down through past the Mill District. Unfortunately, I won't get into it. I actually had my first car accident right in the center of it at that intersection. So, good and bad memories in the area. But I'm speaking in support of the overlay. I think it's great for the community. I hope we act on it tonight. I think the people of Saugus are tired of hearing steps back. I think this is an opportunity to step forward. I think we've done that already tonight with voting to approve funds for a stabilization fund. Heck, we voted for a 5-year capital plan. We're looking ahead, and I think that's what the residents of Saugus are looking for. And I think with this overlay, we're able to look to the future while maintaining the integrity of the past, maintaining the historical significance of the building, and open up the door for a lot of opportunities for the area. Maybe I'm optimistic, but that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Article 9? Okay, seeing none, we have 2 votes that are before us. Yes. No. The first vote that's going to be before us is to refer this back to the manager, which would require a simple majority. If that vote passes, then it's referred back to the manager and we're ready for adjournment. If that vote should fail, then we would vote on the changing the zoning bylaw, which would require a 2/3 majority vote. But we would do that immediately after the first vote in either case. Yes. We have a roll call vote requested. So the first question before us, and I will have the clerk call the roll, is to refer this issue to the back to the town manager.
Okay, Adebato? Bartolo? No. Billingsley? No. Brown? Yes. Cardinale? Carlson? Ciccolini? No. Connors? Costin? No. Cottam? No. Cottam J? Cox? No. Decaro? Yes. Devlin? No. Donato? Dockery? Doherty? Falaska? Finn? No. Fowler? Yes. Goodwin? Groak? No. Garino? No. Johnson? Jones? No. Lucy? No. Long? Yes. Lopresti? No. Maltese? Manugian? No. McCarthy? No. McLaughlin? No. Mareshi? Moses? No. Pelzinski? No. Paolini? No. Politano? No. Paracchio? No. Quinlan? No. Rando? No. Ring? Rodenheiser? No. Rossetti? Yes. Smith? No. Spencer? Stewart? No. Sweezy? No. Travers? No. Vecchio? Witten? No.
With 5 yeas and 33 nays, the motion to the amended motion to refer it back to the town manager has been defeated. So at this time, we'll give the clerk a second to set up her screen. And we're going to have a roll call vote on the motion itself, which is to amend the zoning bylaws by adding the text you've all seen for Article 17.
Adebato Bartolo? Yes. Billingsley? Yes. Brown? Cardinale? I'm sorry, Brown? Yes. Cardinale?
Carlson? Ciccolini? Yes. Connors? Costin?
Yes.
Cottam?
Yes.
Cottam J?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Decaro?
No.
Devlin? Yes. DiNardo? Dockery? Falaska? Finn? Fowler? Goodwin? Grook? Garino? Johnson? Jones? Lucy? Long? Lopresti?
Yes.
Maltese? Manugian?
Yes.
McCarthy?
Yes.
McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mareshi? Moses?
No.
Palzinski? Paolini?
Yes.
Politano? Paracchio? Quinlan? Rando? Ring? Rodenheiser? Rossetti? Smith? Spencer?
Yes.
Stewart?
Yeah.
Sweezy?
Yes.
Travers?
Yes.
Vecchio? Witten?
Yes.
34 votes in...
Who's?
Mr. Connors? Oh, caught him.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the vote?
Thank you. 35 votes in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. The motion does have the two-thirds majority to pass. We have a motion to adjourn. Second? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your service this evening.